The full-price disappointment that broke my gamer spirit. 2026 edition. The last SimCity game. It was the last game I ever pre-ordered. It was such a disappointment. What's so frustrating is that the core concept, multiplayer SimCity, was awesome, but they had to make too many compromises and it didn't work well at launch. That was the last game I ever bought from EA. The whole company is dead to me, and from everything I've seen since then, I'm not missing much. Kerbal Space Program 2. I'm such a huge fan of KSP1 that I couldn't wait to pay for a sequel and bought early access on day one. Dumb move. Never again. For those who don't know, it was a total cluster F and the parent company closed the studio and abandoned the game. I played it for an evening after the final patch to see how it was and then found out that Steam had a 2-hour refund policy. I think they should have provided an exception for an incomplete, abandoned game. Recently, Little Nightmares 3. The first 2 installments were executed beautifully. This one, not so much. It seems 3 wasn't made with the OG creative team. However, they've just released a spiritual successor, Reanimal. Civilization 7 is not done. The whole thing is such an odd franchise. The base versions all suck, yet after like 3 exceptions, they end up good. It's just sad that you've got to wait years for the full experience. I actually do enjoy 6 now that it has all of the expansions. I bought Civ 7 knowing all of this. I did the same with 6. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do the same when they release 8. I think I might have Stockholm Syndrome. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. I had a day off work, decided to give it a go. Got to the Vader fight and thought, wow, the first fight with Vader comes quick, and then the game ended. 5 hours. I immediately went online to read reviews and everyone talked about how short the game was. Waste of money. But the DLC was fun. If our viewers haven't seen the 2 zero punctuation reviews on these games, then I can't recommend them enough. He doesn't have much kind to say about them. I will say that the game did have one very impressive achievement. It made the incredible Sam Witwer sound flat, boring, and devoid of any charisma, which is a feat of voice directing in itself. Anthem. The game had so much damn potential, especially the flying and elemental combos. There just wasn't enough content or support. Ark Raiders. I only played it twice. I also regret Ark Raiders, but at least I had a couple of fun stories from it. Marathon, on the other hand, I'm having way more fun in a genre that I thought I just didn't enjoy. At the time, No Man's Sky. On release, it was broken, buggy, and missing a lot of content. Now, to give full credit, the studio kept working on it and now it's a great game and fully worth its price, but I refunded it day 2 of release. I honestly can't believe the turnaround on that game. I had it day 1 and refunded it as well. Decided to try it again beginning of this month and I am hooked. Aliens Colonial Marines. Paid like $100 or more, I don't remember now, for the collector's edition and everything. I was so frickin' hyped. Didn't regret it long though, because I returned that crap when I started seeing the reviews drop about how poorly the thing ran. Thank frickin' God I didn't open it right away. The best part is, many years later I saw it on Steam for like $1.99 and I figured, screw it, it can't still be broken. And lo and behold, it was in fact still frickin' broken. Still, $1.99 was a lot easier to swallow rolling the dice than the like $110 or whatever I paid for the collector's edition on launch day. Xenophobe for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1988? I was 12 years old and it cost me 75 Canadian dollars. Game prices haven't followed inflation. Horrible controls? I think I played it for 5 minutes. I'm still holding that grudge almost 40 years later. I loved that game in the arcade. I spent so much money playing it. I got it on the Nintendo and it ruined all of it for me. It was so bad. Forspoken. I thought it might be rough, but I didn't want the internet to make my decision for me. So I bought it, and while certain aspects weren't as bad as I thought, others were downright miserable. I was in the middle of fighting when I realized that while I'm doing a lot of flashy stuff, the enemies are just kind of standing there doing nothing, and this is stupid. Mass Effect Andromeda. Not the worst game, but it wasn't at all what I was expecting, and a massive letdown after the original trilogy. It was the last time I pre-ordered a game, and it will continue to be the last. Spore. The first section of the game was very entertaining, but it quickly became obvious that the later sections were full of last-minute content because the publisher demanded the developers stop making the game and publish it. Nothing could compare to the expectations set by the original demo showcase. It just wound up being so much less at every stage than it could have been. Anthem. I bought copies for myself and 2 of my friends. I will never forgive EA for what they did to BioWare. Yo, but that was a legendary 20 hours of a game you all enjoyed and never touched again because you'd done everything. Man, that flying though, and the combat, so much fun. Battlefield 6. I played the game for 2 hours and never bothered with it since. I've come to the conclusion that I'm very bored of military FPS games after nearly 30 years as a gamer. Yep, there's only so many ways to make the same game interesting. I don't even think Battlefield 6 is a bad game, I'm just done with that genre. I've played hundreds of them over the years. Marvel's Avengers. Kind of interesting that they gifted us all of the in-game purchasable DLC before they pulled it off the market for sale, forever though. Have any other games done that before they folded? Brink, the physical release for PC. I was misled by the marketing and believed I was buying into an open-world game with an interesting concept. Played it for a few hours the night after I bought it, and never touched it again. Battlefield 2042. Paid full price at launch, and it felt like a beta for months. Been a die-hard Battlefield fan since I played the 1942 demo back in the day. I even really liked 5 despite its issues. I pre-ordered the Ultimate Edition of 2042. Never again. Rise of the Robots for the SNES. It was my parents' money, but I was upset still. There should have been a class action suit on that one. Back 4 Blood. Daikatana. I have a sealed copy for PC I found in some old boxes from a move. I've not unsealed it for reasons known to everyone who's played it. DayZ. Spending $60 to starve to death every single game was not my best move. Man, I've got some fond memories from that game and the clones that came later. I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it. My buddies and I had a blast on that game, as buggy and frustrating as it was. Diablo 4. I paid for Deluxe. Oops. This. A few weeks after launch they discounted it. I pre-ordered it too. I'll never pre-order a game ever again because of this. Brink. The $60 at the time was a lot of money for me. The concept was interesting, but the cost was not worth the 3 hours I got out of it. Very short-lived game. Starfield. It's so monotonous and grindy, everything's far away, the ship and base building aspects feel like afterthoughts. No Man's Sky 2020 edition. Starfield was like seeing a cover band do lousy versions of your favorite band's best songs. No, it was more like seeing your favorite band doing lousy versions of their own songs. Oh, this last reply to the Starfield thing is kind of brilliant, because yes, it's frickin' Bethesda. What did you expect other than for it to be a bit of an aimless, grindy open world with characters who felt sort of surreal? And that's from someone who's enjoyed a lot of their games over the years. The strength of these games in the past has lain in the side quests, and increasing the vast distances and time between those side quests was not solving anybody's issues. Forza Motorsport 8. Painfully bugged at the start, poorly optimized, the devs lied about the built from the ground up thing, it was more like burnt from the top down. Missed out on many tracks at launch, and still misses many tracks and features in its current and final state compared to Forza Motorsport 7, or dare we say, 4. Exactly the same goes for Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. 2023 through 24 was a bad time for non-Horizon or Gran Turismo car guys. Let's see, how about nearly my entire Steam library? Borderlands 3. I pre-ordered it, the storyline sucked, the grinding for rare loot sucked, the maps were practically empty and you'd just run from one location to another and try to farm for loot. They killed off the good characters, they destroyed what made the guns awesome, all in all just a massive disappointment. I haven't given Randy Pitchford another dime since. That dweeb couldn't pay me to play another Borderlands title. Payday 3. What a terrible addition to an otherwise great franchise. Elden Ring. Dad with 3 kids, so quality time for video games is few and far between. That crap is hard, and my daily patience allowance is always reserved for the miniature vandals and arsonists in my house. Oni on PlayStation 2 really hurt. I was a teen, and it was money that I'd actually worked for. Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero. Felt like a lagging Street Fighter game. Only method to win is just to spam charge your ult over and over without any real dynamics between characters. Literally tried to refund it online after 10 minutes, but couldn't. Open world Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was so much better. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Dragon Age: The Veilguard. The graphics were amazing and it was very polished, but the writing sucked and it was just boring as F for me. I was so sad they massacred my boy, as it were. I scrolled just to find this very answer. I feel like they massacred him too. I've been a total Dragon Age fanboy since the very beginning. One of my favorite game series of all time and definitely my favorite RPG of all time. What an absolute blunder. It didn't feel like I dragoned any ages. I never played Mass Effect either and didn't realize that they'd just copied the Mass Effect party dynamics and dropped them into the game. My roommate saw me playing it and brought it to my attention, and I thought, how lazy and uncharacteristic. Anyways, I didn't finish, I just couldn't. I finished it. The last mission is more of what we wanted from BioWare, but it was too little too late. I hope the franchise has a reboot sometime in my life with developers who get more creative control over the IP. Mobile Suit Gundam. Journey to Jaburo. Holy crap, what a mess. Diablo 4. I got it day 2 with my buddy to play with. I think I made it to level cap and just went, I'm not having fun playing this game. I'm not sure what it was, but it felt like doing chores. I think it was like $80 or something. I got Path of Exile 2 when it released. It was way more interesting. Feels like the devs care about the players. Blizzard is basically dead at this point, in my opinion. Fallout 76 Tricentennial Edition. It was half price just days after release. It was by far the worst release I've ever been a party and witness to. Should have waited for it to hit the bargain bin. That thing didn't hit the bargain bin, it hit the "for the love of God, buy me" bin when it was being sold for pennies. Is it good now at least? Not really. My friend and I bought it last month. Played for about 2 hours before uninstalling. What a boring, tedious game. Borderlands 3. I loved 1 and 2 so much that I lined up the midnight release to get the true Vault Hunter pack for $100. And I still haven't finished it. I pretty much hate every Vault Hunter player character. Compared to Borderlands 2, it's a swing and a miss. I haven't even tried Borderlands 4. Evolve was pure garbage. It had such great potential too. I was so excited to see that the same developer that made Left 4 Dead was releasing an asymmetrical monster FPS. But balancing issues and initial poor monetization, like the Season 1 monsters being sold separately and not included in the Battle Pass, that was a double whammy. And then it went free to play after we'd paid for all that, with a focus on cosmetic microtransactions, and couldn't retain a healthy player base. What a shame. Okay, this is an oldie, but Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness. I got about a third of the way through before finally giving up. Awful camera angles which made the jumps unnecessarily difficult, if not impossible to judge accurately, so you died. A lot. I'm still salty about it, because until then, it was my favorite game series. Have you tried the remastered version? They've been releasing all of the old Tomb Raider games you can buy on Steam. Angel of Darkness is actually my absolute favorite of the series as well, and the remake looks nice. Diablo 4. I've seen it on Game Pass. Is it worth playing at all if I can just get it through there? I've never really played that style of game before, and I've always been passively interested. And now for an abbreviated summary of the comments that followed this question. Yes, no. Yes, no, no. Diablo 2 Remastered, yes, yes. Path of Exile, no. Hell yeah, definitely not the worst game of all time, bar none. Starfield. The hook of building your own spaceship gets boring pretty quickly. Not only that, but the game's exploration is beyond dull. There are no aliens in general, and heck, the alien worlds themselves are boring as F to explore as well. In my opinion, it feels like a really, really bad knockoff Firefly open-world RPG. Final Fantasy XVI. I remember during one of the kaiju battles getting bored of all of the button mashing and wondering what would happen if I just didn't press anything during one of the button mash sequences. Let me tell ya, it just sits there forever. You can't lose. I was already pretty tired of the game, but that killed it entirely for me. WinRAR. I enjoyed the demo so much that I expected the full game to be mind-blowing. It's exactly the same game, but when you win, it shows a gif of Winnie Rabin rolling in a pile of cash with a speech bubble saying, WinRAR! Kool-Aid Man for Atari 2600. Full price meant many pitchers of Kool-Aid made with a half gallon of tap water, a cup of sugar, and an 11-cent package of Kool-Aid mix. Cut off all of the tokens from the Kool-Aid mix, Mailed those in, and 4 to 6 weeks later, we got a crap game and the precursors for adult-onset diabetes. Okay, I was saving the comment spot for that previous WinRAR joke, but honestly, what the hell? A, that there was apparently a frickin' Kool-Aid game, B, that you got it by purchasing Kool-Aid by the truckful, and then C, that you frickin' caught diabetes from this? I mean, I think you win the category for this video, man. Catching diabetes with your game is fairly big as far as lifetime achievements and disappointment go. Personally, the only food product-related game that I ever got was Mission Nutrition by Kellogg's, which as we all know is a 10 out of 10 game with no faults. You know what? I can't remember the last time I paid full price for a game, let alone a AAA game. Steam sales truly are a godsend. I pre-ordered that Gollum one, then when it was too late to return it, I saw the reviews. I haven't even played it. Oblivion Remastered. Just felt like they tricked people into buying it for nostalgia. Then they abandoned it, and it still has bad performance issues. Playing the original is still preferable. In my mind, it had one fatal flaw: no mod support other than a smattering of edits or texture replacements. Bethesda's games have been relying on mods since Morrowind. Hell, technically Daggerfall too, if you want to count the mandatory community patches to keep you from falling through the geometry. Space Marine 2. I love 40k. I just couldn't get into the combat system they came up with. It looks great, but I didn't find it fun. Was really frustrated at how weak my bolter was against Tyranids. Outer Worlds 2 for me. I learned my lesson after that first game. It did not take long for that game to become painfully boring. Dead Island. I did not find that enjoyable. Sekiro. It felt like there was no wiggle room for experimentation. I understand why people like it, but it felt like the game wanted me to play its way or no way. Did you happen to play a previous game by the same studio? A lot of adjusting to Sekiro for my group was shaking off habits gained in Dark Souls, so your problem does check out. There are really no builds or many alternatives to combat now that I think about it, so you have to really like being a slashy clang jump now ninja man from the get-go. It's the most difficult in the beginning, in my opinion, when you're learning the rhythm of combat and how to counter specific "you can't block or parry this" kind of moves. If you stick with it long enough to click, it's suddenly your favorite game of all time for just about anyone I've talked to about it. You've got this. Give it another go. Mario Strikers Battle League. What an empty game. Every single Warcraft expansion after Cataclysm. Mists of Pandaria was actually pretty great in my opinion. There were some real heavy themes in the storylines that you experienced, and there was a ton of content for casuals. But I think a lot of people just couldn't get past the new Pandaran people's looks. Battle for Azeroth made me quit though. That was when the writing began to get abysmal. Destiny 2. It's all DLCs for an extra $40. It's truly about $5 to $10 an hour to play. Arc Raiders was $40 and I'm 200 in easily. Skyrim was $60 and I've had probably 8 big run-throughs. Minecraft was $20 and I've played it for easily 2,000 hours. Hellgate London. I played it a whole hour and got bored out of my mind. Gran Turismo 7. I loved the older ones and thought it would be greater than or equal to, but it was way less than. Man, so it's not just me. I had every version from PlayStation 1 and 2, and then didn't have another PlayStation until PlayStation 5 came out, so I was really excited to revisit Gran Turismo. I don't know, it looks really nice, but the car selection didn't feel as broad and there wasn't as much obscure fun stuff. I played it for a couple of weeks and then just kind of lost interest. Overwatch. Hey, which one? Overwatch, Overwatch 2, or Overwatch again? D&D Pool of Radiance. Yes, I'm old. I was never able to even get the game to work. It wanted you to make all of these discs, and then it wouldn't accept them after you made them. It was a disaster. I took it back. I guess some people must have gotten it to work, but I never could. Even tried the later versions, and had the same issue where it wanted me to insert a disc, even when there wasn't a disc anymore. I don't really regret it because it was fun for a weekend, but Star Wars Squadrons is completely dead on Steam. You can only get into bot matches now. My brother pre-ordered the deluxe edition of Anthem, twice, for both of us. I was coming down with the flu and I thought if I'd play it, it would distract me through the illness. I played it once and never again. The flu was preferable. Extreme Paint Brawl. I deserve to be locked up for paying actual real money for that. The Callisto Protocol. Cyberpunk 2077. Never made it past the tutorial because fighting felt like trying to swim in jello. That said, maybe the game is great. It just wasn't for me. I brought the Switch 2 edition on sale. They did go back and fix a lot of the bullcrap. The game is really fun now, but based on what I heard at launch, I dodged a bullet.
Parents with nanny cams, what have you caught your babysitter doing? This was my equivalent of pre-kindergarten. All the kids were regressing in their movement ability and getting really fat, so they set up spy equipment. Turns out one carer was doubling every baby's food portions and forcefully overfeeding them. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsules meds and use them later. Didn't find out about it until he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the second time. This isn't a bad one. My parents caught the babysitter carrying our 60-pound golden retriever like he was a baby. We caught our maintenance guy spooning with our 130-pound mastiff on the floor. We encourage their love as best we can now. Once, at the very last moment when no other babysitter was available, I hired one that was sort of notorious for not being good. Not dangerous or anything, like leaving the child unattended, but like the type where she would not console the child if they were crying or punish them for doing small things. By the way, I was very suspicious, so I was continuously glancing at the baby cam. The babysitter was playing with him, singing songs, and completely engaging him well beyond the way you would expect somebody who was considered a bad babysitter to act. Essentially, what happened was the babysitter got hired by a crazy parent who didn't like her at all, so they spread a bunch of mumbo-jumbo through the neighborhood. When I came home, I gave her a very large tip, and she was the one I always hired whenever I needed a babysitter. I've been a pretty regular weekend nanny for an amazing family for 4 years now. They cycle through a different couple weekday nannies since I've been with them. There is only one monitor, and it's in the little dude's room. Once the mom showed me on the camera why they let one go. Little dude said, "Mommy said I don't have to do that." And the nanny snapped back, "Well, it doesn't matter. Mommy's a dog." And then dragged the kid out of the room by his shirt. Super fired. Not a nanny cam because this happened in the 90s, and I don't think we had them in Scotland then. But my mom came home early one day because she had become suspicious of our nanny as my sister and I never slept after a day with her. She found both my sister and I in bed in the middle of the day. Turned out my nanny had been dosing us up with child medicine to make us sleep all day so she could sit and do nothing. My mom put a nanny cam in my sister's bedroom. The only disturbing thing my mom allegedly saw was the babysitter crying while holding my sister. Turns out, the babysitter just had a miscarriage the day before. Well, a case which happened near where I live. Woman used to work, husband out of country. Had a 2-year-old kid. They hired a nanny to look after him during daytime. Day by day, kids started looking malnourished. So she set up a spy cam. Apparently, the lady used to bring her kid and feed him all the food left for the kid she was supposed to babysit. Then she would feed the kid cheap biscuits. She was promptly handed over to police. My story isn't that interesting, but I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were mostly just how almost nobody followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my bro was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and saw my bro walk into my room, lay on my floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It just warmed my heart. We have cameras outside of our house. One day my neighbor told me that he saw my bunnies roaming the streets a few times. I didn't believe him, so I took a look. One time at work, I looked at the cameras and saw the gate slightly open, so I rewound the footage. I go to work super early, so I watched as my wife fed them, then got ready for work. The bunnies peeked around the side of the house and waited to see my wife's car leave, then they pushed on the gate hard enough for the latch to set free, then they left one by one. Later, before I got back home from work, they would make their way back and close the freaking gate. Smart little suckers. I never knew the gate latch was so weak, so I fixed that problem. A friend caught his nanny hitting their kid for interrupting that day's binge of the TV show Friends. I travel the US for work, and am fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They have never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy. Opening doors, scooting chairs over places so he can jump up onto the counters, etc., etc. Last year I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them, I will only drive. So I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover that was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great. Kept up on texting me about the dogs, said things like tossing them a ball right now, so I would check in via the cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough to make them exhausted, she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. A little late to the party, but here goes. My mom suspected our maid of stealing the silverware, and she's just freaking nosy. Anyway, the maid was indeed stealing the silverware. I think that ended up being overshadowed by my dad screwing her though. Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby instead of grabbing the baby wipes. For anyone wondering what happened afterward, they fired the nanny immediately and the father became a stay-at-home dad. We have a security camera in my bedroom for my free roam bunny so we can keep an eye on her whilst we work, if we go on holiday, etc. Well, my dad is 50 and is a big bloke who acts like he doesn't like pets, came over to visit one day whilst I was out. He went in my room and crouched down calling the bunny. He spent an hour trying to pet the rabbit and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to pet you and see how fluffy you are." He just about crapped himself when I spoke through the security camera to tell him she's very fluffy. My family bought one to see our dogs when we leave on vacation twice a year. It's one where they can hear us and we thought it'd be great. We hardly used it. We also asked our maid to dog sit for us while we were out. Once when we looked at the feed, we saw the dog sitter there a solid 30 minutes early just petting the dogs and playing with them. She's since retired from working, but she was the sweetest old lady and we love her. Another time, my dad left a wad of cash on top of the washing machine, about $600, and she put a rubber band around it with a note saying he misplaced it. I was a nanny for a family for over 10 years. I moved 8 hours away, but sometimes I drive up to stay with them if they need me for a weekend. I miss the kids so much. I also babysat and house cleaned all through high school and college. I pride myself on never stealing a thing and never having laid a hand on a child. I'd rather maintain a great relationship and have guaranteed client base for years to come instead of a $20 object to pawn. Most they'd see me do on a nanny cam was picking my nose. This is a bit of a tangent, but has anybody ever seen the show Nanny 911? I remember when that show used to come on a few years ago, and it just blew my mind how irresponsible some of these parents were. And that's not even including how crazy the kids would get sometimes. We once caught the nanny putting charcoal to feed them as a snack. This woman claimed that she thought it was a snack. It was in a charcoal box. My brothers were 4. Chasing my cats around with a broom, hitting them. She's since been fired. From a cannon, I hope. My grandpa was staying with my parents, but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task, and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple rooms, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home and their master bedroom cam had never been triggered before. When they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look, cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked, aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his butt off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her and she just apologized and said there was connection or some crap to that matter. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there was audio for the build-up. I lay awake at night sometimes, just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. I was the kiddo. My mom often tells the story of how she watched me give a big ol' hug to my babysitter who just broke down out of nowhere after serving me lunch. Turns out her dad had died a month back and it just wasn't a good day for her. I still remember you, Miss Yancey. I hope you're doing just fine now. The couple I sat for had a nanny cam in their living room, the kind that went in teddy bears. They got me on video giving their 2-year-old the Heimlich after he tried to eat a rock. We have a nanny cam, and we caught our nanny dancing with our baby, making him laugh and giving him kisses. She's the best, and the cameras give us the peace of mind to know she really treats him like her own. I pay my neighbor to feed the stray cats in my garden when I'm away for days at a time, and the camera caught my neighbor trying to come in by pole vaulting one time. He nailed it amazingly. I got a nanny cam to keep an eye out for my elderly grandfather, especially when the home aides were there. My grandfather started asking for lots of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A brooch that my aunt was supposed to get disappeared, and then I heard reports of my grandfather being inappropriate with some of the home health aides. He was busted, squirreling away his medication that he was supposed to be taking in his chair, giving money to an aide, and inappropriately harassing another aide. We didn't have a nanny cam, but my mom set up the camcorder when she suspected her babysitter was stealing, and then caught the babysitter stealing. She returned most of the stuff when my mom threatened to report her to the police. I think she should still have reported her anyway. Now she probably just went on stealing at other people's places. The family I nanny for told me that their previous nanny got caught doing loads of awful things. The couple that outraged me most were 1, leaving their 3-year-old daughter in the tub with water up to her chest for 2 hours every day while she sat in another room unable to see said child. And 2, once she went to run an errand with the same kid, and their doorbell camera caught her putting the kid in the car seat, not buckling her, and peeling off. My mom said you could see the toddler trying to buckle herself in before they took off. Edit. Number 1. The camera was not in the bathroom. It was where they were able to see where the nanny was, room near bathroom, and their kid if the door was left open, which it always was while she was bathing. Number 2, they thought she was a perfectly good nanny until their kid was saying weird things that were going on, and they decided to watch the footage. They fired her after seeing what she was doing, and that's where I, Super Nanny, came in. The cameras weren't actually for the nanny. They were for the kid's therapist because she was prone to violent behavior and they were trying to fix it. My aunt has a nanny cam and found my older cousin's babysitter playing blackjack with him. She lost $50. I've caught her making pillow forts that are heavily resistant to the monsters that may or may not come out during heavy thunderstorms with my kiddo, 20 minutes after bedtime. Needless to say, she was dealt with appropriately. I'm not a parent, rather the child, and I had this nanny, or Yaya as we would call it. It became useless because she soon found out and kept unplugging the camera. It turns out she was slowly stealing money from the family. We fired her. I was the child, and there weren't any nanny cams, but my parents had left a small bucket of toys and things to keep me busy, and they hired a babysitter to watch me while they both had to take overtime at work and knew they would be gone most of the day. The babysitter moved that bucket of toys to another room, put me in a crib, and proceeded to go off and read or something and left me there for hours with nothing to do, only coming back to check on me or feed me. My parents came back to me just sadly sitting in my crib. Indoor cameras hooked up to the same unit as the outdoor cams. Husband was walking to his study, saw a giant huntsman spider, Australian here, and screamed like a little girl and jumped away. Needless to say, I bolted to the computer to watch the playback on repeat for a few minutes. I laughed so hard I had an asthma attack. She stole a single puzzle piece of what we were trying to solve. Saw her put it in her pocket. Final straw was one of our freaking potted plants. Who goes out of their way to steal a potted plant? Hello? I'm glad I stopped babysitting before cameras became a thing. A couple I sat for had adorable kids, but the dad had one room in the house devoted to a full model railroad setup. Dozens of trains, bridges, teeny villages, the works. After they went to bed, and during that long, boring stretch before the parents came home, I just played with the train set. Only regret is that I couldn't toot the horns because the kids would have busted me. Not a parent and not a nanny cam, then why are you commenting on this post? But my uncle once set up a wildlife camera, the ones that hunters use, to get a photo of something happened in my great-grandmother's apartment. She was very demented, so she told us incoherent stories about how there were people there stealing all of her liquor and chocolates. Turns out, she was the one who stole the goodies, but we also found out her other son, my other uncle who no one has contact with due to his shady actions with his wife, had a key to the apartment and was regularly visiting at midnight to steal some jewelry. Friends of ours don't have kids, but have dogs. They were going out of town and told the dog sitter about all the cameras, including the one that is outside, but sometimes picks up reflections and will actively notify them of motion. The dog sitter seemed to get it, but she forgot to convey that to her boyfriend, who came out and walked around naked quite a bit. I was the one caught in the camera a few times. Number 1. A family who had bunnies caught me on camera booping noses to the beat of the song I was singing, little bunny foo-foo hopping around the kitchen, picking up all the lettuce and munchy munch munch. Number 2. A different family saw me get freaking tackled by their 95-pound Mastiff puppy, and they immediately called me to make sure I didn't have a concussion since I just kinda laid there for a while. I was fine, I just got the wind knocked out of me. Number 3. Yet another different family saw me reading a book to their kids and later complimented all the voices I make. I had no idea they could hear audio and I got so embarrassed since I really did go all out. When I was around 12 years old, my parents caught my babysitter on camera stealing my NES games and shoving them into her pants and shirt. They confronted her about it and she kept denying it until Ninja Gaiden fell out of her pant leg. My mom took her into her room and made her take out all the games she stole. She literally had games shoved under the strap of her bra on her back so that she could sneak them out of the house, and others were put inside the waistband of her underwear. She must have really thought about this for a while. Anyway, we got the games back and she was sent home without pay. I dog sit for some neighbors, one of which told me she has a camera in the living room/dining room for her dogs. You know those ones that dispense treats? Anyways, I thought it was a strange essential oil diffuser until she told me what it was. I was being paid to play with them for an hour, but she found out that I was actually staying for 2 or 3 hours. When she asked me about it, I think I said something like, I'd want someone to do the same for my dog. Ever since then, she leaves me treats in the kitchen and even got me a Christmas present from the dogs. She picked up our pug Doogie and was dancing around the living room with him while that Carly Rae Jepsen song was playing. My uncle told me this once when a babysitter was holding his daughter, my older cousin, when she was a baby. The baby was playing with the toys and she somehow swallowed a small piece of something and the babysitter performed the Heimlich but for babies. She saved my cousin and her family was thankful. They have no idea where the babysitter is now, but right now she's supposed to be around her late 40s. Edit. I asked my uncle about this and apparently they know where the babysitter is. She's in California and she is a very well-paid doctor and makes over $310,000 a year as a physician. That's the only thing he knows since she left. Not a nanny cam, but the baby monitor managed to catch our then 1.5-month-old projectile vomiting on me, and then straight up into the mouth and on the face of my husband 2 minutes later. When she put my daughter down for a nap, she took a nap on the bed next to her. This is just so cute. Caught the babysitter rubbing one out on a couch. The babysitter was/still is my female cousin. I figured the best thing was to just say nothing, save the awkwardness. She did it a fair amount. I then mentioned our house cam by accident some months later and her face dropped. I realized what I'd said, then casually threw in that I never checked it, again, to save the awkwardness. A colleague of mine saw that when his 8-month-old baby cried, the nanny just ignored him and kept watching reality TV, not paying any attention to him while he bawled his eyes out. She did not attempt to console him or anything. She just tried to hear the TV. There were a few other troubling instances too, like she'd say they went on a brief stroll but disappeared for hours with no explanation, or she didn't follow the parents' instructions on how to put him to sleep and let him cry, and my colleague realized that the baby was anxious and desperate every time the nanny arrived. Heartbreaking, really. Not a nanny cam, but a vid. My sister-in-law sat the camera down thinking she turned it off. I have over an hour of her teasing my toddler in a mean way with candy and popsicles. She started telling him that he would get some, then hold it just out of reach. She then ate it in front of him, making sounds. She was also calling him mean and weird names like Turd Muncher and Ricky Stupido. The camera got all the audio, but only some video. At the end of the video is when we got home. When I confronted her with the video, she started claiming I doctored it, that I was a liar, a jerkwad, and hated her because she was prettier than my wife. She is not. That was the last time she was allowed around either of our kids unsupervised. She was the sister-in-law for 10-ish years and is now the crazy Karen ex-sister-in-law. I can't have her presence on social media because she attacks me all the time and says lies. I'm also estranged from my brother because of her. 10 years of her warped his perception of our family. He still thinks some of the whacked-out things she accused our dad, sister, other brother, and various other family members of were true. No reasoning has convinced him of the truth, not even the thought that if video evidence refutes some of the claims, then all can be considered suspect. I may get comments and advice of what I could do, but in the end, you can't fight crazy, and sometimes life is just not fair. The only thing I have done to make things better is ignore her. She eventually just starts attacking someone else, like an annoying yipping dog that just needs to annoy. As for my brother, I hope time will help to fix things. I also think that he might just be more like her than I think. Birds of a feather fly together. Oh man, this next one is actually so wrong and so messed up. Sitting on our couch playing with the dogs like we paid them to. I have a nanny cam for the purpose of creeping my dog while I'm at work, but it's how I discovered my former superintendent was coming into my apartment randomly to steal a nug from my jar of red eye. Friend caught hers rummaging through her closet and stealing a blouse. She confronted her about it when she returned home, and the woman played innocent. She was wearing the freaking blouse. Remember that post from before, you can't fight crazy? Yeah, I think that applies here. We hired a dog sitter over the Thanksgiving holidays to check on the pooch, feed the cats, get the mail, etc. Edit, definitely pointed out the various security cams to her. She asked if she could bring her sister along for company. We said sure, no problem. The sister, we found out in conversation, attends a nearby hyper-conservative fundamentalist school. When the hired sitter took the dog out and the fundy sister had the house to herself, she took the opportunity to scream, "Frick!" at the top of her lungs a few times. Not a lot else. Just paced around the living room dropping high-decibel F-bombs. Gotta find some way to vent that fundy angst. Watched her outside playing with my dogs. She was dog-sitting. Our yellow Labrador and golden retriever puppies started munching the blueberries right off our blueberry bushes. They know dang well they're not supposed to get into the blueberry patch. We watched our dog sitter run over to them to try to get them to stop. She then ran outside and ran back out with the bowl. She proceeded to race the dogs for the blueberries. Had to be one of the highlights of our trip. We came home to a bowl of blueberries in the fridge and 2 very guilty puppers. My friend is a nanny, and sometimes she takes the small human she watches and has her dance for the parents randomly in front of the camera, or wave since it is a Google Hub and has photos of the parents. Small gifts for the parents to find if they review the video from that day. Not my kids, but my sister's. This was when my nephew was still very young and my sister was still breastfeeding. Long story short, my sister caught the babysitter drinking her breast milk. She had her suspicions because my nephew would go through twice as much milk when the babysitter was taking care of him. My sister set up the camera and caught the guy in the act. Apparently the guy was some sort of fitness nut and had read that breast milk could be very beneficial. As weird as it sounds, my sister ended up working out a deal with the guy. She got him to drop the price of watching the kid in exchange for a bit of breast milk every now and again. I have cameras all over the inside and outside of my house. It came standard with the Ring doorbell. Next came critter cams I put near my bird feeders, then cameras everywhere. I used them mostly to look for the wild bunnies in my yard and to see the owl leave its roost at night. The indoor cameras are dog cameras. My wife and I use them to view and talk to our dogs while at work. The weirdest thing I've caught my dog doing? I made a batch of jerky, put it in a large Ziploc bag, and placed it in the dining room table in preparation for a camping trip. My 19-pound Shih Tzu, which is large for a Tzu, was caught on video moving a dining room chair, jumping up onto it, then jumping onto the table. He ate the entire bag of jerky, leaving only the bag. He did this in less than 10 minutes. My babysitter took the kids out of the house and claimed she went to the park. Turns out she took them to a friend's house without car seats. I'm a nanny, and it is in my contract that all cameras must be disclosed. Any undisclosed camera I find will immediately void the contract. That being said, if I get thrown up on, pooped on, painted on, food on, whatever on me, I need to know what is a safe area to change so that my bosses don't get a show they aren't paying for. People opposed to this are not people I work for. One of my exes and her mom had to leave town for a week and they had 3 cats. One only had 3 legs because he got hit by a car, poor timid little thing that hid all the time and refused to come out, and a dog that had diabetes. They hired someone just to come over once in the morning and once at night to feed, let the dog out and give the dog his medicine. They had cams, I'm not sure why they put them in place, and found that the guy stayed there all day just playing with the animals and even got the timid cat to come out and cuddle with him. They showed me the videos of him arriving and all of their pets rushing to the door to meet him. I house/dog sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks, they come home, their 2 giant huskies are happy, I get paid, and all was well. A couple weeks later, my mom calls me laughing and laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dog sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently, all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the 2 huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies, over and over and over and over again. I sit for them as often as I can. Not a nanny cam, but a camera in my sister's room when she was a toddler. She had a habit of getting out of her toddler bed, so me, my dad, and my mom would watch it, and every time she got up, we'd all say, "Go back to bed, Serena." It was funny to see her reaction. I was the babysitter. I used to look after the daughter of a couple who played tennis with my uncle. They were super rich and went out all the time. The kid would go to bed at about 7, then I would sneak a bit of booze from their well-stocked bar. I wouldn't drink it on the job, but I'd pour it into my water bottle to take to my next party. It happened on and off for about 3 years. Then one night, they must have changed their security system or something, and I got busted. They were very chill about it, seeing as I clearly didn't drink it while watching their kid, but told me they could get in trouble for supplying.
What's the dumbest thing you've ever witnessed someone get offended by? I had a lady very offended because I would not let her hold my few days old baby. This was a complete stranger at the grocery store. On my whiteboard at work, I'd written the slogan, "No matter what happens, someone will find a way to take it too seriously." After about a week, someone from HR came by and asked me to remove it because they had received a complaint. The irony was worth it. A lady started yelling at the cashier and tried to jump over the counter for checking the $100 bill she paid with. Wouldn't you say that this is a good reason to be even more suspicious of somebody? Years ago, a woman came into my work and brought a black stove. The guys take the box up there to her and she flips the F out because the box said Negro on it. Everyone tried explaining to her that it was the Spanish word for black, but she left there saying we were all racists. Politicians in the UK wanted to ban the term brainstorm because it could offend people with epilepsy. At a restaurant years ago, and this guy ordered a soup. He pulled a bay leaf out of the soup and went freaking mental. "There's a leaf in my soup," and was convinced that it was off the tree outside. Manager continued to explain that it was a bay leaf, an ingredient for flavor, and this guy wasn't having it. Since then, anytime my wife cooks a soup, we treat the leaf like the bean in a cake, and whoever finds it gets a free rein over being super grumpy, as long as it's in a jest. I used to frequent a drive-thru near my job on my lunch breaks. After they repeated my order and told me to pull forward, I always said, "Thanks," before I drove to the window. One day, the manager comes to the window and says, "Hey, I'm gonna tell you something. Every time you come here and you say thanks, it just sounds really rude. Thanks is just something you say with your buddies. Here, you say thank you because you just sound really rude." Have not been back there since, and I immediately reported him to corporate when I got home. I had a drama teacher get mad at me for pretending to be a werewolf in a skit. She claimed it was disrespectful of transgenders, which I suppose means that transgenders are werewolves to her. I had a stranger get upset because I covered my ears when emergency vehicles went by. He said I was showing disrespect or something. F that. Those sirens are loud. Hey, F you, man. Those sirens felt terrible because of you. They went home crying that night. I hope you're proud of yourself. The idea of an emergency vehicle driver bursting into tears at the thought of the song of their vehicles being unappreciated is funny on a truly weird level to me. I used to live with a black guy from the UK. One night we went out to a local bar and started talking to some random people. A random white woman got upset when I called my roommate black during a discussion about something. The correct term is African American. According to her, even the Brits are African American. There was a big uproar in DC some years back where an official called a budget term niggardly and ended up having to resign because the hate speech police can't use dictionaries. Somebody once complained at my restaurant that their Swiss cheese didn't have enough holes in it. Why would you complain that you were getting more cheese than you were supposed to? I've met people who have been offended by me not allowing them to pet a dog that has syringomyelia, neurological/spinal disorder, which causes immense pain if touched during episodes. I explained to them that this dog, a cavalier, can get aggressive and snappy if he has an episode, and it's not something that we can detect easily. They told me that I shouldn't be walking an aggressive dog, as it may bite someone who wants to pat it. Schools suspending, or worse, a child for chewing a Pop-Tart into the shape of a handgun. Or the deaf kid named Hunter, who was suspended because his sign language form of Hunter looked like a gun. Googled and verified. This has actually happened before, folks. As a server, I once ran food out to a table with a young, less than 6-month-old baby, dressed in generic brown baby clothing. I put the plates down in order, and when I got to the baby, I asked the mother, "Did she get anything?" She glares at me with one of the most teed-off faces I've ever seen and snarls, "He's a boy." So I did the most logical thing I could think of, shrugged, said, "Whoops," and left. I have a friend with her first baby that is 6 months old. Every single piece of clothing this kid has is a neutral color, no pink or blue. Just last week, she posted a big rant on Facebook about people constantly getting her child's gender wrong. People need to pay better attention. It's very clear that Lexi is a girl. Of course, all of her friends made comments backing her up, and not one pointing out that no one can tell the gender of a 6-month-old without normal cues. Whoopsie! I really should have used a throwaway for this post. This information made it back to the parents, and boy were they not happy I was talking about them anonymously on the internet. I was once talking about how I visited the Grand Tetons and talked a little about the geology since I found it very interesting. One of the people I was eating lunch with was very offended I suggested something might have happened 2 million years ago. I work with a guy who doesn't believe that dinosaurs ever existed and that all the fossils that have ever been discovered are a hoax by archaeologists. This person is an adult, seemingly, human, with a college education. We just don't talk about dinosaurs when he's around. I understand that paleontologists, not archaeologists, would be the ones to discover dinosaur fossils. Here is an excerpt from today's edition of Riling Up Robbie with Dinosaurs. Me. Hey Robbie, who are those guys running around burying fake dinosaur bones again? Robbie. Flipping archaeologists, man. It's a goddamn conspiracy. The government pays them by the pound for the fossils they find, so every year they make them a little heavier and blame it on carbon dating. I couldn't make this trash up if I tried. This is a true story. My dad was at work and witnessed a guy hold a door for a woman, just to be polite. He smiled at her and waited. As she got to the door, she said, "Why did you hold the door? Because I'm a woman and I can't myself?" To which the guy replied, no, I just, He didn't really know what to say and fumbled out a weird apology. The woman just made more snide comments and walked through the door and went on her way. My dad and him had a laugh about it, wondered why someone would be so strange and thought nothing more of it. The next day, this guy gets called into his manager's office and is told he is being accused of being sexist and harassment in the workplace. This guy had to go on a 2-day course on dignity and diversity in the workplace because he held a silly door open for some ungrateful person. As someone who's been alternately shouted at for being condescending when I tried to give up my seat for an older person, and for being disrespectful when I didn't stand up, I feel this man's confusion at traditional norms. I guess I offended someone at my work because I insulted their intelligence. I run audio at conferences, and the presenter kept turning away from his microphone. In the middle of his presentation, he asks me what's wrong with the mic. I tell him, there's nothing wrong with it, just be sure you speak into it. Then he got on me afterwards, saying, don't tell me how to do my job. It's always around the holiday when someone gets offended for another person wishing them happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever. The person meant no ill will. They could have easily said nothing, yet someone always takes it like a personal assault on their beliefs. It makes me so angry because of how irrational it is. I always get irritated by white people who get themselves into a lather on behalf of other people of other races over some innocent blunder by another white person, particularly if the people of the other races don't seem much bothered by it. Around 1993 or so, when my kids were just small and the family was all going to church, Baptist, we were all at a social and my daughter was wearing some little girl clothing from Osh Kosh Bagosh, and this one really snooty guy from Sunday school said he would never allow his kids to wear something so offensive, as he considers Bagosh to be taking the Lord's name in vain. I was so taken back by his statement and attitude that I didn't say anything, but in reality he was just trying to prove how super spiritual he was. I finally realized that I didn't have much in common with these people and stopped going. I had a similar one over Christmas with my dad, and a real stretch of the imagination. He was horribly offended by the Happy Honda Days commercial, not because they're idiotic, but because, and I'm trying to quote here, holidays clearly means Christmas, and it's a foreign car. That's really offensive. I think I responded something like, so Christmas is the only holiday, it's distinctly an American holiday, despite the fact that Jesus predated this country by 776 years, therefore a car that's built in Ohio and Alabama can't put their name in the word holiday. I may have added that he's going around looking for things to be offended by, he could probably do better, but it deteriorated from there. Christmas with the family. Brazil got so offended by the Simpsons episode about the country that the Ministry of Culture tried to censor it. You know, it's a good episode of something when an entire country gets butthead over it. I believe there was a similar, if lesser, outrage around the episode with Australia, i.e. one of the funniest episodes. I worked at an AOL call center the day after the 2004 Super Bowl. You know, the one where Janet Jackson's breast made its appearance, and because AOL sponsored the halftime show, thousands of people called in to either cancel their accounts and, I crap you not, called to say that they would never sign up for AOL because of that breast. People would bafflingly wait up to 3 hours in the call queue just to say that even though they didn't have AOL, that exposed bit of chest cemented their resolve to never sign up. It was one of the worst days to ever work there. Worse than September 11th. It was that day that I realized how foolish and petty people can be about one single African-American breast. A guy friend dressed up as post-Vietnam, wheelchair-bound Lieutenant Dan, and his girlfriend dressed up like Forrest Gump for a Halloween costume contest at our local bar. They won, but not before a drunk girl had to yell at my friend that his costume was offensive to people in wheelchairs. This story would be perfect if your friend was actually disabled. Eating at a locally owned, family-run, authentic Vietnamese restaurant. A roommate's boyfriend, who I've posted about several times, he is basically the epitome of white male, Tumblr, SJW, accused me of culturally appropriating their food and forcing them to cater to me because I am white. When I pointed out that as a kid my neighborhood had suddenly had a large influx of Vietnamese immigrants and I knew the family personally and have been going to their restaurant for years, even bringing every guest/couch surfer to the place, he tells me, "They don't make the restaurant for white people. Stop smothering them with your privilege." This guy went from a broke-as-F Vietnamese immigrant to having an insanely popular restaurant. People drive from the other side of the city, 45 minutes, to eat there. And 13 years after opening, there is always a wait no matter what time or day you go. And was able to pay for his 3 children's college tuition. I think he likes the universal popularity. Visiting New York while studying English in Boston for the summer in 2003. I was sitting in a bar with other Spanish classmates as we were planning what to see and where to go in the city. We are speaking Spanish between us, but with a Castilian accent and speaking really fast. A guy in an expensive suit stops at our table after paying his takeout meal and asks us very friendly, "Where are you from, guys?" We smile and say proudly, "Spain." His face suddenly changes to an angry expression. He flips us the bird and says, "Get out of my country, mother flippers," and then left. I'm Belgian and have a Dubliner accented English because I lived there. In New York, I was chatting with a lady while waiting for the underground. I was trying to get to a Yankee stadium. When this girl asks me if I'm Irish, I say, "No, I'm Belgian," and she throws a tantrum that she was Irish-American and I should not pretend to be someone else by copying an accent. Apparently, I had to speak with a Belgian accent so she wouldn't be confused. Also, I'm probably more Irish than she is. I have a friend who is allergic to gluten. If you ask her about it, she gets super offended. Naturally, we used to like to ask her what her diet has to consist of. We all used to eat dinner together and it would just come up in conversation from time to time. Everything seemed just fine. Then we found out from her roommate that she would come back super teed off that we asked her questions. We had no clue. We just wanted to know and were curious about how many things out there have gluten in them. Gosh, that girl is awful. When I was a cashier at Borders, I had one lady get offended because I called her by a man's name. The stupid thing was that she was picking up a book her husband had shipped to the store, and his name was on the order. Ooh, I have one. In college, I saw a guy from class on the bus. We started talking a bit. He starts to tell me about his big plans with Maria. Maria this and Maria that. I have no idea who Maria is. So I am thinking and thinking. Then I remember seeing him being friendly with someone in our class. So I said, "Oh, that girl in our class." And he looked at me with a dead-eye stare and said, "Maria is not that girl. She has a name, and her name is Maria." He was offended that I wasn't respecting her personhood enough because I called her that girl. He then stopped talking to me. I was commuting from Albany, New York to Brooklyn for a little while, and I would drive past a town called Fishkill, New York. I stopped there once to get gas, and at the gas station there was a bunch of people, much more than normal for a small town. I heard them talking about how they were from PETA, and there was a protest in the town, because it was called Fishkill. I saw one of the protesters get in an argument with a townie, and then heard the townie say, "Kill is Dutch for creek, you butthole." To this day, the funniest thing I have ever witnessed. I was in a loud bar with a bunch of friends, and there were a few F-words being thrown around. The table right behind us asked the waitress if she could kick us out for being the most offensive group of individuals. For several years, I taught a summer school class in filmmaking to elementary schoolers, who can be a very sensitive bunch. 2 stories. We were discussing an action scene from Firefly, and I identified Zoe as the black woman. A couple kids gasped, "That's racist," one volunteered. "She's African American." I told them that black was not a racist thing to call people, and that Zoe would not in fact be African American because she wasn't from America, she was from space. One of the kids had pitched a movie about the Civil War, and in the discussion the KKK came up. Not everyone had heard of them, so I described them as a club for mean, angry people. They hate people for being different, like they hate black people. One of the boys jumped out of his chair. "Mr. Lukebin said something racist." He was trembling with righteous indignation. "I didn't say I hate black people," I told him. "I said they hate black people. I'm not a member of the KKK." That didn't satisfy him, so I ended up having to go with, "Look, I'm Jewish. They hate me too." And that calmed him down. I was standing at a bus stop with another lady. She was yelling on her phone, and I was watching a movie on mine. We had both just missed the previous bus and had to wait another 25 minutes or so for the next one. Given her rather unstable condition, she was very upset at something. I tried to blend into my surroundings as to the best of my abilities. I didn't last too long. She said something rather outrageous along the lines of how her boyfriend cheated on her with someone. Being stunned, I lacked the restraint to not look at her. Unfortunately, we made eye contact, and that's where it all went downhill. For the next 20 minutes, she yelled at me, thinking that I was the hussy that corrupted him. She ended every sentence with white-hooded B-word, as I was wearing a white Eskimo-like jacket with the hood up. Apparently, she also thought that I grew up in a place called Red Deer, Alberta. I had to Google it afterwards, and that I had slept with hundreds of guys. FYI, I have only ever dated or done the deed with a single person, so you get just how stunned I was at these comments. I didn't say a single thing to her during this entire 20-minute episode, and only talked when I had to convince other bus patrons that I had never met this woman before. In summary, I'm a white-hooded B-word from Alberta who slept with every man in town. Forgot to mention I saw her again the other day. She didn't notice me, thankfully, but she had been ranting to some other poor soul about her experiences. Back in '99 or so, a small group of us made the pilgrimage to Memphis to spend the weekend eating ribs and touring Graceland. During a taxi ride from Beale back to our crappy motel, barreling down 240 at least 90 miles per hour, the taxi driver is completely turned around facing us in the back seat. He has sock puppets on both his hands, knees on the wheel. As we scream and white-knuckle everything we can hold on to, the sock puppet tells us racist jokes that are so horrible, even Reddit would be offended. He swerved from lane to lane and scared the crap out of all of us. It's a miracle we didn't die. The offense. Years later, I was the best man at the wedding of one of the fellow riders in that cab. In referencing all the exciting adventures we had had together, I alluded to the racist puppet show in my best man speech. A friend of the bride who was in an interracial marriage stood up, berated me for being a racist a-hole, took her gift back from the gift table, and left. Talk about a tense crowd for the rest of that speech. I was able to play it off and finish the last half of what I had to say. Everyone else thought it was a nice speech. To be clear, I didn't tell the story. I didn't repeat any of the jokes. All I did was list a series of unrelated, yet noteworthy events that occurred during my years of friendship with the groom. It was later explained to me that this girl loved playing the race card since she was a white girl married to a black guy. When the husband, who returned to the wedding with the gift about an hour later, explained to her that nothing racist was said, only that the word racist had been used as an adjective, she was too embarrassed to come back. All she heard was the word racist, and then her instincts kicked in. A couple of years ago in a middle school art class, I saw the teacher literally scream at a student just because she said, "Oh my God." She shrieked, "Don't you dare use the Lord's name in vain in my classroom." Then he got sent out of the room because he laughed at her overreaction. Got another one. Offended over me being single. Worked in an office, and all the girls were either married or in serious relationships. At the time, I was 20, nearing 21, and very much enjoying my single life. The stuff that would come out of these women's mouths when I mentioned going out with my friends or the dating scene was pretty appalling. I always wondered why they didn't dump their boyfriends or get a divorce if they were so flipping miserable being tied down. The discrimination was pretty ridiculous too. Can't tell you how many times I was denied having a day off over some other girl because, "You don't have a boyfriend/husband. What do you have to do that's so important?" My cousin and his friend were waiting in line at the movie theater to see Titanic back in college. They're joking around and say something like, "I wonder what happens at the end of the movie. Oh, I heard the boat sinks and everyone dies." The lady in front of them in line was furious and turned around and yelled at them for spoiling the end of the movie.
How do you subtly duck with people? When my dad was a mechanic, people would come in and describe a noise their car is making. It's kind of going screech. My dad would close his eyes and make them repeat the noise over and over while listening intently, saying, "Keep it up. I think I almost got it." Until they're basically out of breath from all this weird-sounding gibberish coming out of their mouths. Imagine other professions trying to do this. "My God, what's wrong with the engine? We have to get this plane off the ground." "Well, it kind of..." Yeah, spit it out." "Well, it kind of sort of goes like..." I don't know what's going on." Sir, listen. Yeah? You're an idiot. I used to have CCTV monitors in my office at a pretty large store, so I would call different departments and hang up right before they picked up the phone and call them back as soon as they turned around. After a few tries, they would stand and wait for the phone to ring again, but I'd wait until the exact second they turned around. Nobody ever found out who it was. Easily the best entertainment ever. When someone sneezes, I tell them to shut up, and they almost always reply, "Thank you," because they are so used to other people saying, "Bless you." Hi, narrator here. I know it's so short, but it's just the idea. This is so funny. Just shut up. Thank you. Or what if it got even like more aggressive, just like, achoo! Shut up! Thank you. I work in pathology and I spend most of my day dictating into a microphone. I keep myself entertained by messing with the ladies in transcription in a myriad of ways. One thing I like to do is pick a random word and slightly mispronounce it all day just to mess with their heads. One time, we received a tube of chapstick, a small tube of toothpaste, and a bottle of skin lotion that the ER had taken out of someone's backside. Not sure if they were a little freaky or just mentally ill. After I dictated that case and described the items, I went to the gift shop and bought the same items and then left them on their desk with a note that said, "No need for these to go to waste." They were confused but had used the hand lotion. By the time they listened to the dictation, I could hear them shout from down the hall. Also, since I recite a lot of case numbers, anytime a number happens to have 666 in it, I will immediately say, "Mark of the Beast!" and use my phone to play an evil laugh and sounds from hell. On Halloween, I taught myself how to say a couple of sentences backward and then recorded it and played it backwards into the microphone. That one freaked them out a bit. If there is ever a really good joke on Reddit jokes, I will end my dictation for the day by telling the joke to them. I also like to do prank calls. I'm the peanut butter jelly guy. When I'm on a waiting list at a restaurant, I always put the name down as Parpar. About half the people kind of hesitate or look at you weird. Play it straight and just spell it out if that happens. When you're called over the loudspeaker, it sounds like they're stuttering, "Parpar, party of four?" You can also do weird funny names that are just barely believable. Yes, people, obviously not every restaurant says party. Use another name for those. As far as the loudspeaker goes, I mainly use this at a very busy breakfast joint on the weekends. They have outdoor waiting and therefore announce names. It will work for any type of calling out names. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to stories that my friends have told me, so I like to retell their own story to them a year or two later, now starring myself, and see how long it takes for them to catch on. They start off with a look of, "Oh man, I could tell some of the story as soon as he ends this." Then it turns into a look of, "Wait, that's my freaking story!" A buddy of mine will randomly wish me happy birthday on Facebook when it's not my birthday. So then a bunch of other people wish me a happy birthday and I have to explain it's not my birthday. This ducker does it every year. A couple of weeks ago, he posted on my wall, "Congratulations, man. I knew you'd land that opportunity. So proud of you." That followed by a couple dozen people asking me what had I accomplished. I had someone whose birthday was a day before mine. At 11:45 p.m., as we ate dinner, I pointed out it was his birthday, and without question, the staff did the song, dance, and clap. At 12:01 a.m., he then told them it was my birthday. The server demanded ID, then I got a very, very unenergetic song, dance, and clap. I swear, even the cake looked slump. Best proof I ever had that servers hate that crap. Make up a hobby or skill for your friend. Over a period of weeks or months, nonchalantly describe your friend's aptitude at this skill to your common friends or colleagues. If you pick something general enough, your friend will encounter lots of questions and it might snowball. Examples: Dan is a very good artist. He painted this for me. Show them a picture of some art someone else painted. Did you hear Dan won an award for his artistic skills? Dan is actually a really good singer. He sung in that state championships last summer. Did you know Margaret fixes washes? Bonus points if you pick someone you only vaguely know. Then you can deny starting the rumor and blame someone that knows him even better. In public places like malls or grocery stores, I nonchalantly thank random people. I say, "Hey, I saw what you did back there, and I just want to say thanks. That was great." Most people don't appreciate little things like that anymore, but I do. Then walk away. Bonus points if you pat them on the back. I knew a friend that did this once because he lost a bet and went, "I just want to thank you," and awkwardly handed him $5 and walked away. Use a fake name when ordering food for delivery. Use a different name each time, but always use the same number. After a while of doing this, they get a huge list of names after putting your phone number in whatever system they use. Pay cash each time. You can hear them hesitate for a moment as they try to figure out why there are so many names with different last names as well. Usually they'll ask if you're the person that's the most recent on their list. Always say no and give them a brand new name. I also like to use names that sound weird in a fake kind of way but aren't super obvious. Chester Elegante, as an example. At the Varsity Chicken Wings joint nearby Syracuse U, would enter name as Icarus for the announcement, "Icarus, your wings are ready." I used to work in a call center a few years ago. We had to take customers' details and I'd always repeat back to them to make sure they were correct. While doing this though, I'd duck with them by saying things like, "Oh, is that K for knife? P for pterodactyl? Yeah?" Good old silent letters. Get them heavily involved in a good conversation while standing, and just hand them something. Don't look at it. Keep the conversation going, keep eye contact, and hand them anything, from a tennis ball to a rock you just picked up. Almost every time they'll grab it without thinking. Works even better if talking and walking. See how much stuff they can hold. Keep looking at a spot a few feet behind them with a worried expression. Look back at them and smile again. Look 3 feet behind them this time. Look a little more scared. Repeat and escalate until they get really uncomfortable and look behind them. It works even though they know you're messing with them. There was one guy in the music department who would always leave his phone on whatever desk he was working at. Every single time I'd walk by, I'd pick it up and move it slightly, no more than 6 inches away, and keep walking. I never took it. I never moved it far. I did this several times a day for several months. Then I stopped. I walked by and instinctively he went to put it back and missed. The look of shock on his face made my life. A family opened this small local theater and we went a couple of times during October and watched Annabelle and Nightmare on Elm Street. After everyone got deep into the movie, the staff would sneak up behind us, dressed in black, and duck with us pretty hard. Their kid crawled as fast as he could down the row seats and rubbed up against our legs. That was the best one. It was freaky, but hella fun. I don't know, man. I think that would be kind of crazy to send your kids into the dark theater to mess with people as they're watching a scary movie. What if somebody stomped their foot down to the child going, "No, not today, Annabelle! Grr!"
No, please. I didn't mean to.
That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Why would you do this? No! Stop! I had a roommate in college that rarely went out to drink, but when he did, he got completely trashed and usually ends up having no recollection what had happened. So whenever we would be drinking together, I'd take a handful of leaves from outside and hide them in his room in places like under his laundry pile, under his bathroom sink, in his jacket pocket, toaster, in the closet, etc. He still thinks he has a leaf hoarding habit whenever he goes out to drink with us. Wait, you had a toaster in your closet? I saw this on another thread. Can't remember the name of the hilarious person who wrote this, but start out with a subtle lisp when talking to someone you usually see on your own and when others aren't likely to be around when you speak to them. Over the coming weeks, make the lisp more prominent until you can barely be understood by that person. When it has become so bad that they cannot at all understand you, just drop it. Start talking normally again. The guy who's been trying to figure out what you're saying will be so confused. If he asked about it completely, deny it. Act baffled each time he brings it up. Bonus points if he starts asking other people. For example, Steve and Jerry, starting with Steve. "Hey, Jerry, you know the guy from accounting?" "Yeah, dude. What about him?" "You've heard his lisp, right? He's not got one anymore." Jerry gives a weird look. "Dude, he's never had a lisp. I don't know what you're talking about." Steve will be completely mind-ducked. You could also apply this to having a weird accent that suddenly drops. Not a real accent, just a really weird, unrecognizable accent that nobody can figure out. I really love bananas. I take a couple with me every day to work for mid-morning snacks. I decided to make it a habit of taking a break every time I was eating one to stroll over to a coworker's desk, chat with her while eating, and throw the peel into her garbage bin before walking back to my desk. She would deal with the smell for the rest of the day. It took a week before I got a, "If you throw that in there, I'm gonna end you." I mean, dude, I don't know, I might feel the same. I have a very sensitive nose, and if you're coming over and just like dumping your crap into my garbage can that I have to work next to for the whole day and be like, "No, that is not a funny prank. That is a disaster. Please don't do this. Please, just no." If you're in a group of people, all of you line up along both sides of an exit. When someone walks out, everyone start clapping and cheering for the person. Some friends and I did this on the subway metro in Singapore while waiting for a train. Some of the reactions are priceless. My one friend and I refer to every animal as kitty, or some variation of it, i.e. wolves are howling moon kitties, meerkats are stand-up kitties, and obviously ferrets are snake kitties. We often ducked with people, like one time when I insisted that this girl's gross dog was a slobber kitty. She was super proud of having this purebred dog, so she was getting quite flustered over the whole thing and practically yelling the breed of her dog at me. The first friend I mentioned walks in after not having heard this argument, and the girl says to him, "You can tell what breed my dog is, right?" And he replies, "Slobber kitty," without missing a beat. She got so mad. Definitely a subtle one, but I like it. I work in a restaurant. As a servant to the public, it's easy to get down on your job. Subtle things really help make you feel less like a backside-kissing peasant. Almost every time I run a tray of food, I make eye contact with the nearest table that's waiting on food and give them a look and smile as if I'm coming right for them to deliver their meal. Then I pass right by them and take it to the actual table. I love when people interrupt their conversation with, "Hey, here's our food." Oh, only to be left disappointed. A little sociopathic, considering most of these people didn't do anything to me, but it's just a nice way to feel in control at a job where you are so often walked on. "It was you! You did this to me! Oh, come on! I've definitely had this happen to me somewhere before. No! Now I know your tricks. Now I know. I'm gonna watch you and bring like, hey, you get back here. Ah! I looked after my buddy's house when he was on vacation. I took every photo out of its frame, scanned it, photoshopped me in somewhere, printed them, replaced in frames. Months after he got back, he called me saying his brain was telling him something was wrong, but he rarely looked at the photos anymore, so it didn't click until his sister was over and saw the altered photos. One of my best friends is generally quite impatient, and for the last 8 years, I've been purposefully waiting for the last ring whenever he phones me to answer because I know he hates it. The best part, though, is I periodically tell him every so often that I'm doing something that he hates to duck with him, but I'm not telling him what it is, which drives him nuts as he can't figure it out and often insists I'm lying. I do a bunch of things to mess with him, but this is my fave as it's the longest running, lowest effort, mildest inconvenience that gets maximum annoyance. When we're closing down my store, there's a small vestibule at the back door where we have to stand still for about 20 seconds so that we can arm the motion alarm before leaving. As a rule, no one can be in the store alone, and so some employee always has to be with me for this process. I fart every single time. If they move, then the alarm won't set and we have to stand there even longer. In high school, I would sit in the back with my buddies, and whenever we had a substitute, I would sit completely still with my mouth gaping open until drool started pouring out slowly and dripping all over my notebooks. Sub would have zero idea why someone with such a seemingly debilitating mental handicap was in a regular class. Of course, they were far too uncomfortable to say anything that might suggest something was wrong with me. On a side note, I never did the deed in high school. I was once inspired by a post here on Reddit where someone replaced one of their family portraits with a picture of Vladimir Putin. One day when our parents were at work, my brother and I did the same thing by changing out a picture of ourselves with one of Putin bottle feeding a baby goat. We thought it was inconspicuous enough to go unnoticed for a little while, but we both gave it less than a day before our parents would notice. 6 months later, I'm in the middle of my college semester and I get 2 texts. One from my brother saying, "They found Putin," and the other from my dad saying, "You clever plastard." I used to manage a fleet of company cars. One of my friends who worked with me had a car for my fleet. He doesn't know I had spare keys for all of them. The parking lot is not large. You can fit about 50 cars in it. They're all company cars, and there's no reserved parking. So, being the friendly jerk I am, shortly after he arrived at work, I would go out for my smoke break and move his car over 1 or 2 spots. Sometimes I would even reverse the car back into the same spot, if he went in front first. I shuffled his car around the parking lot every 3rd day for about 4 months straight, but never too far from his initial spot. One day after work, we were at the pub getting a pint. He says to me, "Man, I'm so tired when I get to work. Sometimes I can't even remember where I parked my car." It's been almost 2 years to this day. I still move his car, but I've reduced the frequency to about once a week. He still doesn't know. In my apartment building, there is an unprotected Xfinity Wi-Fi. I have my own Wi-Fi, so I never connect to that one, but for some strange reason, one day, my phone connected to it on its own. So not knowing it did that, I started watching YouTube on my phone and accidentally hit the Chromecast button at the top of the screen. And when I pressed it, it gave me 2 different smart TVs to cast to. I had a huge evil grin on my face. So first, I immediately searched a Rickrolled video and casted it to one of the TVs. I thought this was hilarious, but I wanted to be more clever. I started playing all sorts of different videos. Girl ripping out her hair with a drill while eating corn, 2 frap videos, South Park videos, 4 words, all uppercase. Halfway through the last video, the connection ends. I guess they finally figured out how to turn it off. So the next day, I came home from work and checked my mail, and next to all the mailboxes was a very angry letter to the whole building. Really me. Can't remember it word for word, but it said something like, "Whoever the rumpole is putting videos on our TV, please stop! We have young kids, and now they are repeating the inappropriate language that was in those videos." I immediately bust out laughing in the middle of the hallway, and believe me, I'll be doing it again. I had a coworker once who was a real jerk. I started making fun of bald customers, to their face in a friendly manner. It was a cigar store. Making light is mandatory, on a frequent enough basis when he was around to make him think I really got grossed out by bald people. I don't, and I think I'm probably going bald. It was all part of my long con. After I got him thinking about baldness on a regular basis, I brought in my shills. I talked to customers I was friends with. Under my instruction, they'd always stare at his hair when they saw him or ask, "Did you get a haircut or something?" Every time they'd talk to him, we went to the same barber. Neighborhood dude, cut his first cigar. So I talked to the barber into asking him, "So, you want me to do anything about, like the thin parts?" After 6 months of this, he was constantly checking his hair in the mirrors, the glass around the shop, asking all the darn time if I thought he was balding. It was hands down the most sociopathic and impressive thing I have ever done in petty revenge. It was like a total of 9 months of work, involved half my customers and eventually the owner of the store. He had the thickest hair I've ever seen. People complimented him on it. But that jerk farted in my face one time while I was eating quiche, and you don't duck with a man's quiche. Wow. So this man literally went Liam Neeson on this. Like this guy just like walking around and just being dumb. Be like, And he just looks up, his quiche ruined. Darn you. I will remember this day. Revenge is best served cold, just like my quiche, which is now cold and smelly.
What film made you say, holy crap, there's still 50 minutes left? The Sound of Music. They get married and I said, that was a nice ending, and my wife says, the Nazis haven't even arrived. Some people don't realize that The Sound of Music actually had an intermission, and they only watched half of the movie. I literally had no idea there was a second VHS tape until this Reddit thread. Maybe we bought it used because I only remember seeing the first half. The Sound of Music had Nazis? I must have only seen the first half as well. Pearl Harbor. There's a climactic attack on Pearl Harbor. It's explosive and tragic, some people getting hurt or worse, and then the movie slows down and keeps going for another hour. Ugh. Pearl Harbor is a 2-hour movie squeezed into 3 hours. Roger Ebert. The Batman. I know people love it, but I found the movie extremely boring and almost fell asleep. The car chase scene was basically him getting stuck in traffic. I've seen more exciting things happen on a Texas highway. If you just watch the trailers, you've basically seen the best parts of the movie. Save yourself the 3 hours. I should also point out, because it might not seem this way, but I love Batman, so this movie was a big letdown for me. I actually enjoyed the Batman up until the scene where he choked down that bomb and walked away with absolutely no injuries, not even the slightest burn on his face. After seeing that, I looked at the remaining time on the movie and noticed there was still almost 2 hours left. You know, that opinion isn't as controversial as the OP might make it seem. I think after Nolan did the realistic Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy, we didn't need to see that again. For me, it's Titanic. Back in the 90s where VHSs were still a thing, Titanic the movie was split between 2 VHS tapes. The first being all about the onboarding and the love story, while the second finally had the iceberg hit and sinking after spending all of what felt like another hour on the love story. I would always doze off before the second VHS tape got entered. My family eventually stopped playing part 1 and we would just go straight to part 2 whenever we decided to watch Titanic again. I will admit that I, then a 13-year-old boy, cried seeing Titanic in the theater. But it was because I drank a Mountain Dew too quickly and didn't want to miss the drawing scene, better than I could have hoped for. And the sinking by getting up to go use the restroom. I was the closest I've ever been to bursting my bladder. Full Metal Jacket, in an excellent way. When I was a kid, my family used to watch this on Laserdisc. I think it's the only movie we had that not only had to flip the disc, but that there was a second disc. I'm pretty sure with the multiple intermissions, this is why my family considers it a Christmas movie. Although my dad claims it's because they sing Happy Birthday to Jesus. Full Metal Jacket, the family Christmas movie that everyone loves. Daft Punk's Electroma. Good freaking God. It was a solid hour of robots walking through the desert. I love Daft Punk, but that film was excruciating even by French film standards. Which is so weird because Interstellar 5555 is totally a masterpiece. As someone who has casually listened to Daft Punk over the years, I had no idea that they had films for their music. I guess that's something I have to look into. Transformers Age of Extinction. That movie was so awful, I never even finished it. Spoiler, Galvatron runs away like a punk and Lockdown gets split in 2 by Optimus' thick metal rod. Then Optimus flies into space and says he's gonna destroy his creator. My husband won free tickets to that movie. We went to the cinema together. I was actually enjoying it. I found the whole thing ridiculous and not believable, but I enjoyed myself. Then there was a long time of explosions and then the movie ended, I thought. I was like, great, 90 minutes is a good length for a movie. And then they went to freaking China and took another hour to end. It was so incredibly boring, which could have all been avoided if they cut it at the 90-minute mark. The extended version of The Lord of the Rings. I didn't realize how much additional footage there was. It's all amazing though. I've run out of food and there's still 20 days of film left. Please send help. This might get me flamed in the comments, but I've never seen Return of the King, and I saw The Two Towers at a midnight screening and really enjoyed it. Black Adam. I know it was only 2 hours, but to me it felt so much longer. My husband and I thought the same thing. I paused it saying, God damn, how much longer do we have? And then we saw it was 2 hours total. Felt like a glitch in the Matrix or something. At one point during Black Adam, I legit thought the movie was over since it had a climax and then there was still another 30 minutes left. Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. Not in a bad way, I just remember feeling like I was watching the climax and then it just kept going. Would have agreed with the sequels, but I actually thought the first Pirates was a perfect movie. My brother usually quotes Barbossa, Jeffrey Rush, when not wanting to do something. I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request. It means no. I prefer, the code is more like what you call guidelines than actual rules. The Pirates of the Caribbean series are some of my absolute favorite films to watch. They are just straight fun. Gone Girl. In my defense, I know nothing about it and thought it was a rom-com/chick flick. Was going through a toxic divorce at the time and went to see this to take my mind off my troubles. I just sat shell-shocked afterwards. My other movie was World War Z. Near the end, there was this tense scene where he has to walk past one teeth-gnawing zombie. I let out an involuntary and inappropriate laugh at how much it resembled my ex in zombie makeup. It was meant to be a tense scene. Also, when the scientist got scared and ran and tripped down the ramp and shot himself, I was the lone person in the theater who laughed at the sheer absurdity of it. I was on my third date and my GF broke it off because she thought I was a manic. Dude, you're not alone. When he runs back to the ramp and slips and falls and accidentally shoots himself in the face, and Brad Pitt's face had just so much disappointment on it, after they spent like a good 15 minutes building the scientist up as the last hope of humanity, it was hilarious. I've never seen World War Z, but I love a good bad movie. I might have to check this one out. Artificial Intelligence. Man, that movie dragged. And then it finally had the bittersweet ending and I was like, yeah, not my thing, but I can totally see why people like it. And then it went on. That movie was the prime example of the adage that part of knowing how to paint a great masterpiece is knowing when to stop painting. Well, geez, Stanley Kubrick died before filming it. How much harder did you want him to stop? Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that joke made my jaw drop. Hateful Eight. The movie is one long conversation, but in a good way. I love that film. My uncle was in hospice having palliative care with his own room a few years ago. I asked him what his favorite films are, and I downloaded them and put them on a drive. I know what types of films he likes. He was in his 90s and loved westerns and was fine with violence in movies. So I added Hateful Eight. On the night before he died, he told the nurse that he was fine and he was going to bed to watch the rest of this really long film I had given him, which he said was great. The next morning, he got up happy, sat in his chair, and died. Okay, I wasn't expecting a movie scene to come out of this comment section, but as for the long conversation comment, isn't that all Tarantino films? Wonder Woman 1984. Can't believe I'm not seeing this mentioned already. I remember checking how long was left and saying, Jesus Christ, for real? When there was nearly an hour to go. We really enjoyed the first one, so we had a big family movie night, not something we do often, and dragged everyone in to watch the sequel. It was really disappointing. Every film ever since the internet destroyed my attention span. Honestly, one of the best parts of going to a theater is the fact that the social code of the setting forces you to disconnect. It's too easy to check your phone and get distracted by life when you're watching a movie at home. Hell, I've made it through stinkers in a theater I definitely wouldn't have if I was watching them on Netflix or Hulu. I'm looking at you, Jurassic World Dominion. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Once it hit the second half, I had no idea where it was going or how it was going to resolve in a satisfying way. But it did, and is now one of my favorite movies ever. I still want to watch that movie. It looks pretty awesome. Spicy videos after those first 2 minutes. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. It's just a lot of filler. At least the title of the film is honest. The brand new Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, in a good way. Rented the movie and was blown away early on, and seeing more time had me excited to see it through. Really glad to see DreamWorks doing well, and I recommend for others to watch it. This movie has to be one of the most go-watch word-of-mouth movies in such a long time. I constantly hear people mentioning this movie, and I thought it was gonna be something that people would pass over. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. When bats and soups are done fighting, and you know the fight with Doomsday was still going to happen, the name of the movie was the first clue that it was going to be an overly long slog. They could have made the whole Doomsday topic into a separate movie, but nope, gotta combine it with the literal god going against a guy wearing a Coke can. I don't care what anyone says about BVS, it gave me the best Batman fight scene of all time, so I will always stand up for that movie. That Batman was so much more entertaining than realistic Batman. The new Elvis biopic. I wasn't a fan overall, but holy hell, they could have cut 30 to 40 minutes and ended up with the same film. The film had too much dialogue as well, needed a little less conversation and a little bit more action. The only scene I've seen from that film is the "he's white" scene, and it's only because it became a meme on Twitter. Star Trek, the slow motion picture. The Matrix 4, didn't finish it because it was too boring. I had to watch some parts of it again because I literally slept halfway through it, and I'm a Matrix fan. I'll be honest, that movie tried to be so meta, it felt like it was a parody. A History of Violence, in a good way. What seems like an ending to a typical good movie happens about halfway through the runtime. I was really stunned and excited to see where it went next. Twilight, the tree scene almost made me chuck my laptop across the room. They are so terrible that they loop back around to being fun. If you have a group of friends who were really into Twilight in middle school or high school, it forces you to relive your younger cringe self. I thought it couldn't be that bad. Surely my early 20s self wasn't that bad. Oh god, the cringe was next level. My friend and I had a great time though, binging the films over a weekend and drinking. I remember that one close family friend that took me to see it in theaters. I think I was 13. Anyways, I remember her sitting there and laughing at how horrible it was, and the teenage me was so offended. I still haven't seen those films, and I'm not sure if I ever will. I do love the lore of these movies inspiring the writer of 50 Shades of Grey though. That Zack Snyder Justice League movie. Was all excited to see it, and then about 2 hours in, I was checking how long I had left. It was about an hour. I never finished it. I think he made a good choice to have it broken into parts that had their own little title screens. It's like going to a theater and having an intermission. Shame it felt like, I might as well get through this, rather than, oh boy, can't wait to find out what happens next. But I'm glad Snyder took out the part where the Flash accidentally motorboats Wonder Woman. You know, the classic scenario that seems to pop up in Whedon movies, or at least in superhero movies. I remember it happening between Bruce Banner and Black Widow in Age of Ultron as well. I will never watch that movie again. After the 2 hour mark, I couldn't believe that there was still 2 hours left. Also, every time Wonder Woman showed up, she went into slow-mo and they played her music. It got so freaking annoying. Thor, Love and Thunder. When we saw how much time was left, we just shut it off. Fun fact, I think Thor Ragnarok is the worst MCU film. I know people won't agree, but when Bruce Banner says he's going to show who he is and then jumps off the plane to bounce off the bridge, I wanted to break my TV. Every character morphed into a child in that film. Gangs of New York. Don't get me wrong, it was a great flick, but holy crap, it dragged on. The Return of the King. It had a lot of endings for all the things it had to wrap up, and I mistakenly bought the extra large Pepsi. I also have to say Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Throw the bloody ring in, Frodo, for God's sake. The whole cinema clapped when he finally did it. When I saw it in theaters, I started gathering up my stuff 4 separate times thinking we were at the end. When it did actually finally end, I just sat there, thinking it must be a trick and I will not be fooled into putting one arm into my coat sleeve again. The Last Jedi. I was ready to leave after the space battle and thought the ships were going down to the Red Sand planet and that was going to be the credit roll. The Casino Planet side quest took forever. I'm one of those people that actually like the film only because it didn't feel like a repeat of other Star Wars films. In a good way, Saving Private Ryan. The Normandy sequence is like 30 minutes and then the rest of the movie is like 50 minutes. Gladiator had me saying, holy crap, there is only 50 minutes left? He enters the Coliseum in the second half of the movie. I felt like it had just started. I haven't watched the theatrical cut in over a decade now. The extended gives it room to breathe, better justifies the subplots with Lucia and with Maximus's old servant, and doesn't drag because the film already had me wanting more. It also gives context to the "are you not entertained" line when the slave owner says to him, "you're an entertainer" before the fight. Rewatching it for the first time in a long time recently, I found it baffling that they would cut that line when it only adds about a minute to the runtime. "Are you not entertained" is one of the most iconic lines ever. Me and my friends always throw that out when we have an epic moment in any video game we play. For me, it has to be The Omen from 2006. Not because the movie was bad or terrible, I mean honestly I don't remember it being great either, but what happened before I even entered the theater had more entertaining twists than that whole movie. At the time, I wasn't able to legally get into an R-rated movie alone, and I was supposed to watch this movie with a bunch of friends. Well, all of my friends managed to get into the theater and I was still stuck outside. So I asked a random couple if they would be willing to pretend to be my parents. The woman, who was pretty attractive, put her arm around me and helped me get in. Once I was in, I told them thank you, but before I could leave, the guy stopped me and said, "No problem, but I don't want to see you causing any trouble during the movie." And then he flashes his police badge at me. I was just so stunned that a cop just helped me get into an R-rated movie. It was a pretty cool moment and something I definitely remember more than anything in that movie. The Girlfriend Experience. People might not know this film, but it stars this actress named Sasha Grey. People of culture might know who she is. But I went to go see this film at a small art house theater and I was just waiting for the movie to be over because I thought it was so bad. There were moments in this movie where some scenes were completely overexposed and you could barely see the actors. If I'm being honest, I would have had more fun just watching some of Sasha Grey's home movies instead. I didn't know The Girlfriend Experience was a movie. I always thought it was a TV series. The more you know. Sasha Grey might not have made it as an actress, but she's doing pretty well as a Twitch streamer. Any MCU movie after Guardians of the Galaxy Part 1. I'm not sure what happened, but Disney saw the success of that movie and thought, everyone loves it because it's funny. Why not make all our characters funny? And since then, every main character seems like they need to be a comedian, and the term comic relief character has been thrown out the window into a garbage truck, taken to the dump, and had a nuclear bomb dropped on it. I honestly stopped watching the MCU after Endgame because I felt like they were leaning into the comedy over great storytelling. Plus, Endgame just felt like the perfect jumping off point with everything that happened in the movie. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Look, I respect Stanley Kubrick, and this movie was absolutely gorgeous and had a lot of shots that looked perfect, but what even was this movie? I was just so bored the whole time while I was looking at these perfectly shot scenes. The Dark Knight in the best ways. Yup, this is the one. After he finally catches the Joker, it feels like the end, but the film still has ways to go. I remember thinking, wait, it's not done yet? When I first watched it. Yeah, and the scene leading up to the catch is so dramatic and high production, it totally could have passed for a good finale. Pretty much any big superhero movie. They all have this big battle sequence about an hour and a half in, and you go, wow, okay, movie done. And then they have to build up to another, more final battle. I really liked Venom 2 for that reason. 90 minutes, I got in, they did their stuff, and I left. Top Gun Maverick. After seeing them do the real mission and Mav gets shot down, I really thought they were just gonna end it there and finish it in a sequel. But then it just kept going and it was so good. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The entire movie is amazing, but damn does it take a while. I just felt like that whole movie was stuff almost happening with no payoff until the end. Cruella. Not 50 minutes, but I thought the movie was over when she visited the fountain and delivered the monologue to her mother. Then it still got better. Django Unchained. I really enjoyed the movie, but dear lord, it could have ended like 3 times. This was Tarantino's first movie after the death of his longtime editor. In my honest opinion, his work has taken a notable downturn as a result. I'm down with Django, but Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood were way too long. Avatar 2. I just wanted to piss, but the movie just dragged on too long. But with that said, the second half was really entertaining, to be fair. Yeah, I was like, dude, Jim, we're all seeing this movie in the theaters with good recliners and fancy drinks. The human bladder is not meant to absorb a pint of IPA and then watch this much water splashing around. I saw this with a friend and my summary of it was this. I felt like I had just watched 2 years of a badly edited TV series in one sitting. I still haven't seen Avatar 2, really don't have any interest. I mean, the first one was basically just Pocahontas and Ferngully mixed together. David Cronenberg's Crash. Play started out packed, then I realized after 30 minutes I was one of a handful of people left watching this messed up movie. When it finished, I was the only one of 3 left in the theater. Wow, that's all I can say. When I first read this, I thought they were talking about the movie Crash that beat out Brokeback Mountain at the Oscars for Best Picture. The Revenant. Gah, I saw that movie in theaters and it was so packed, so I had to sit way too close to the screen. And it gave me such a horrible migraine. So I'm sitting there in this movie that won't end and my head is killing me. If I had been there with my husband, I would have just asked to leave, but we had gone with friends. And we hadn't driven ourselves, so I didn't feel like I could. I was so miserable. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Right after the Phantom destroys New York and Alec Baldwin's friends all die, I thought, okay, we should be wrapping this up in the next 10 minutes. Nope! It was another 30 minutes of slogging through an already boring and lazy story. I had to watch Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus for a college class about 3 years ago, and it was awful. From the sound to the pacing and the 5-minute breaks that were just music and a blank screen, it was just overall a horrible experience. Eyes Wide Shut. Most boring film I've ever seen in my life, and I had to go watch it for a class so I couldn't just stop watching it. I hate that movie. And the jerk who plays only one note on the piano for 20 minutes of this horrible movie.
What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you've experienced? I mentioned this in another thread, but here it is again. Me and my friend were at a Chinese restaurant and we ordered a General Tso chicken dinner and shrimp lo mein dish. When we sat down, we took out both boxes and set them on the table about 2 feet apart. My friend opens the first box and we see a shrimp lo mein dish. It has all the things in there. Noodles, shrimp, fried rice. He closes the box and opens the other box. Inside that box is another shrimp lo mein dish. Shrimp, noodles, fried rice. Oh, I think. They must have mixed the order. I was just about to say this when my friend says out loud, looks like they made a mistake and gave us 2, as he opens up the first box again. Inside of it is a General Tso chicken dinner order, General Tso chicken, white rice, and an egg roll. He froze and looked at me. I looked back at him, and we sat in silence. It took us 5 or so minutes to collect ourselves. I have no idea what the frick happened. Not creepy, but so vivid and distinct that I still think about it years later. I had a, subjectively, long, involved dream where I was a vendor at a fish market. I remember getting up early, dressing, doing a whole morning routine, going to get tea, heading out to the docks, buying fish, loading them in a cart and going to get ice, then haggling for ice, buying some less fresh fish while I was at it, then going to a market to my stall, setting up and selling fish all day. It was so real. I talked to friends, smoked nasty cigarettes, haggled customers, ate lunch, had tea, and just lived through the day. At the end of the day, I cleaned up, counted my cash, paid the stall rent, went home, cooked some of the fish I hadn't sold, along with some veggies and rice that I'd traded for. I drank more tea, relaxed for a while, then drew a hot bath, soaked and smoked some more cigs, then went to bed. The next morning, I woke up refreshed, ready to go down to the docks to buy fresh catch. Except I was in my house, next to my wife, truck parked outside, and it was Saturday. No work. My wife and I were getting geared up to go skiing in Oregon and the car was already packed. Weird thing was, in the dream, I was single, and a smoker. I'm not. And the whole long dream had been in fluent Chinese. The effortless kind of fluency that only comes from a lifetime of speaking it. Oh, and I had been Chinese. I'm a big, hairy white dude. Somewhat fluent in Spanish, and I know a little bit of Russian, but it was just weird. I've never worked in a fish market. I wonder who I was. I wonder what that was. I've experienced deja vu a couple of times when I was younger, and while that is certainly freaky, nothing beats the opposite. Jamais vu, which I experienced twice during a period of work-related stress a few years ago. On both occasions, I was driving in my car in perfectly familiar surroundings near my home, when suddenly I had no idea where I was or where I was going. It was like being instantly teleported to a foreign country. It only lasted seconds, but very creepy nonetheless. Until it happened to me, I had no idea that this even existed. Edit, for those of you concerned about my health. Yes, I did see a doctor, and so should you if something like this happens to you more than once or lasts longer than a few seconds. My episodes were stress-induced, but more serious conditions can also cause the symptom. Edit 2. If you're on drugs, well, there's your problem. Oh boy, you guys would love where I work. Weird things happen here all the time, but I'll just talk about one of the creepiest moments I've experienced here. I work as a security/nighttime attendant at an apartment building. It's 24 stories and one of the oldest buildings in the city. One night I'm sitting here when the phone rings at about 3 a.m. and I answer, "Hello, this is Draven at the front desk. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end sounded female but was totally garbled and the only bit I could make out was 23rd floor. I tried to tell the person I couldn't understand them and asked what apartment they were in, but again, garbled response and 23rd floor. After the third time of trying to understand them and getting the same response, I said since I couldn't understand them, I'd have them come up to meet me in the hallway. So I go to the main elevators, and both are up on the, surprise, 23rd floor. Luckily, we have an older service elevator, and it's only on the 7th floor, so I call it down. I get it and hit the button for the 23rd floor, but it won't move and the inner door won't close, so I go to unlock the reset panel and boom, we start going up. Door still open. I'm freaking out, and the elevator is shaking because it goes pretty fast and it's old. As I'm going up, I just stay towards the back and finally I reach floor 23. I step out, door closes just fine, and I look around the hallway. There's nobody around. I walk along slowly trying to listen for anyone awake who might have called, but there's nothing. So now I head the opposite direction and go towards where the regular elevators are, and when I get to them, they're just sitting there with their doors open. I was pretty freaked out, but I knew it could just be the elevators on the fritz, so I get in and figure I'll just reset them when I get to floor 1, when I hear the sound of the back stairwell closing. So I quickly get out and go to the stairwell, and lo and behold, no one's there, but the maintenance door to the machine room is ajar, and at that time, I'm the only one in the building with the key. At the top of the building is a large machine room housing all the really, really loud machinery that does stuff in the building and allows access to the roof. I don't like going into it because it's creepy as heck, and no one ever goes in there. So at this point, I'm seriously freaked out, but I muster up and head in. I shout, "Hello?" And there's no response. The lights in this room flicker because they're crappy fluorescent, so I can't see well either. But at the end of the room, I can make out the roof access door, and sure as heck, it's slightly open. So I slowly continue forward, checking the space in between each machine as I walk by. And there's no one there, so I open the roof access door. I can't see anyone ahead of me on the roof, but there is a slight wraparound, and if there was a jumper or something, I needed to be sure, so I step out and leave the door ajar just like it was. Almost immediately, the door is pulled shut. Now, I might have written it off as wind or something, but this door is hard to shut and hard to open. Really hard. I immediately grab the handle and yank it open, slam it behind me, and run straight for the maintenance door. It automatically locks when it's closed, so I slam it shut too and go back to the 23rd floor hallway, get into an elevator, door still open, and go all the way down to the first floor. I go back to the main lobby, and as soon as I sit down, the phone rings. I pick it up, don't say a word, and sure as heck, garbled voice again, only audibly saying 23rd floor. I hung up the phone, turned the ringer off, and spent the rest of the evening just staring at the parking garage security monitor. There's been a bunch of creepy things happen at this building. It's basically like the Overlook Hotel at night. I walked past a dark room here on the first floor once and swore I saw myself standing inside it. The next night, as I'm inside said room cleaning, the lights flip off and I turn around to see a quick flash of myself walking past. TLDR, creepy ghost or some crap played games with me at work by trying to lure me onto the roof of the building. I knew my uncle had died. My mom had called me and told me the news. It was very sad. She told me in the middle of work and I told one of my coworkers. He expressed his condolences on my loss. A couple weeks later, my sister mentioned my aunt and uncle doing something. I said, "But he's dead." And my sister said, "No, he wasn't." I called my mom. "No, he wasn't dead." To this day, I'm still not sure how much of it my brain imagined and how much of it was real. Did I really talk to my coworker? Was I even on the phone with my mom at all that day? It still freaks me out knowing that my mind could fabricate so complete and real a memory like that. This happened to my dad, so it's not exactly a personal story. Anyway, my dad was driving down a long, lonely highway in Ohio, doing about 90 in a Z28 with a radar detector. Rolling hills and whatnot meant that cops could hide at the bottom before you could see them and slow down. So, all of a sudden, his radar detector starts blaring and he slams on the brakes. Right over the hill, there's a squad car running radar. He's super relieved, but when he looks at the detector, it's not even on the windshield. It was unplugged and in the glove compartment. What the heck? TLDR, ghost radar detector kept my dad from getting a ticket. Posted this in a previous sub a while back, but I'll post it again as it fits here too. I had just turned 22 and my parents had sold their house and purchased a place out in the country. On the property, there was a big shed not far from the house that I decided to turn into my place. Now, I felt kind of uncomfortable in the shed, but sometimes my dog kept me company, so it wasn't so bad. Anyway, I had been in there maybe 2 weeks, and one night I'm on the computer, my dog asleep at my feet, and I need to pee, so I get up and go outside to pee. It's a beautiful, clear night, and the stars were incredible. Next thing I hear the shed door slam behind me. I turn immediately and try to open it, but it won't budge. Now from the inside the shed, I can hear my dog start to growl, quietly at first, then louder. Now he's barking, and I'm panicking trying to get the door open. I must mention that I'm 6'5" and well-built, play sports, etc., but even ramming my full weight into the door won't open it, and I'm really panicking now as my dog's barks turn into whines, then whimpering, then silence, and with all my might I slam into the door and it flies open. The light is off inside now, and it's pitch black. It won't turn back on, and I'm in complete darkness. Can't see my dog anywhere, and I stumble around trying to find a torch. Finally, I find it, and pick it up, and turn on my torch, and I wasn't prepared for what I'd see next. My dog had literally squashed itself into the furthest, darkest corner of the room, eyes closed and shaking violently. I immediately moved towards him, and as soon as I got within reach of him, he leapt at me into my arms and wouldn't move. I picked him up and swear I've never ran so fast in my goddamn life. I never stepped foot in that shed ever again, and my dog wouldn't even go near that part of the property. I don't know what happened in that shed that night, but I'll never forget it. Have a few, but this one stands out. I was catching a SkyTrain in one particular city about 15 minutes from where I get off. While I wait, there's a woman with glazed eyes asking people for money. She came up to me, stopped briefly, and asked, "Excuse me, could you spare some money? My brother is in the hospital and I'd like some money to buy him some flowers." That's rich, I thought. Drug addicts are getting more and more obvious with their lines. "Here's $5. Gave it to her without even looking her in the face, convinced of her intentions. Anyways, my train pulls up and I get on. I look through the glass at her, walking around asking others for money as the train pulls away. The train arrives at the station 15 minutes later, and I walk down and out to the bus stop. There's only one bus the direction I'm going, and just my luck, it is there waiting when I get off the train. So on the bus, I hop and wait for the bus driver to finish reading his paper before the doors close and we embark down the highway. About 5 to 10 minutes traveling, the driver pulls over for a routine stop. The doors open, and to my complete astonishment, the woman from the SkyTrain walks into the bus, a dozen roses in hand. She looks me right in the eyes as she walks past to take her seat. How in the blue heck did she get there? I took the train before her. I watched her at the train stop from inside as we pulled away. I went over a river. I caught the first and only bus going this particular direction, and not only did she beat me there, she had time to go to a store and buy a dozen roses. To this day, I have no idea how this happened. A little backstory. I was a total idealist back in high school, so when choosing a college, I chose to go somewhere that none of my friends were attending, so that I could strike out on my own in a finding myself sort of way. Well, I ended up making a few really close friends my first semester. I mean, these guys became like a family to me in a matter of months. One day during winter break, one of those guys, my buddy Kimbo, had gone back home to visit friends and family, and on his return trip to our college, he hit a bad patch of ice and got into a car accident and was killed. It hurt like a son of a gun for a long time, and I still think about him all the time. But anyways, a few weeks after Kimbo's accident, me and the rest of the guys were getting back from a party off campus, and as we were standing outside our dorm building smoking a cig, I felt my phone vibrating, and when I pulled it out, I saw that I was getting a call from Kimbo's phone. Dumbfounded, I showed my friends the phone quickly and then answered. When I picked up, it just went directly to his voicemail, which played the same message it always had. It never happened again, and we never really talked about it, but for me, it was one of those someone's looking after me moments. I hadn't been doing very well after his death, but seeing his name show up on my cell phone screen one final time made me feel a whole lot better for a time, and really helped me get out of the slump I was in. I have no idea how his phone could have possibly called me, and I doubt I ever will, but this was one glitch in the Matrix that I'll forever be thankful for. Rest in peace, Kim. But feel free to call again. When I was like 10 or 11, I was going to the beach with my aunt and her friends. There were 2 cars of us. To get there, we had to go through a very large industrial area. We didn't know the direction, so our car was following the other. Suddenly, they did an unexpected turn, and so our driver had to take a sharp bend. In that moment, we heard a very clear, loud voice inside the car saying, laughing, "Sharp bend, The driver immediately hit the brakes. We looked at each other, puzzled. We all recognized it as a voice not belonging to any of us. In the very same time, we noticed that the other car stopped as well. The other driver got out of the car with a scared face and shouted to us, Did you hear that as well?" They heard the very same thing inside their car. The area around was fully deserted. Edit. Wow, thanks for the interest. A little bit of background. This happened in central Italy in the early 90s. My aunt used to act all the time, and most of the other guys were theater actors. The voice scared the crap out of us because it was very clear, near but not coming from a direction within the car you could distinguish, nor front nor rear. Inside the car, but from no distinct place. It was like mocking us. We were scared, but soon someone started to say, "Hey, which one of you did that?" Remember, these were comedy actors who used to do any sort of strange voice. This was till we noticed the other car stopping and saw the look of the guy driving that car. They were all as scared as us and told us we heard this scary voice inside our car and told the very same words we just heard. We were there on a hot day under the sun in an area with large streets and absolutely nothing and no one around us. No cars, no people, no buildings. We never figured out what happened. One night, I had a dream about being in a car with my sister at the church we went to. For some reason, it started going out of control, so I jumped to the wheel and tried to keep us from dying. Later, I told my sister about the dream, and she had the exact same dream, but instead, she was the one at the wheel and not me. About a year ago, I had a terrible nightmare. It started off me waking up in bed during a thunderstorm. As the room illuminated again and again from the flashes of lightning outside, I realized that the bed I was laying in wasn't mine. The head of the bed was against the wall the door was located on, and from my perspective, I couldn't tell if it was open or closed. That is, until I saw the face. At first, just the nose and jaw broke past the doorframe, but then an entire face slowly passed through the doorway. I tried to yell, "Who the heck are you? Where the heck am I?" But it felt like I had lost my voice. No matter how hard I tried to scream, nothing came out and this person continued to enter the room, looking dead ahead away from me. Then, just as the person was completely into the room, their head snapped towards me and it locked eyes with mine. I tried to get out of the bed, but felt completely paralyzed. The person started making their way to me, but with every step their body contorted in ways that would break a normal person's bones. Their necks snapped so the back of their head touched their back. Their jaw laid flat on their chest. Their arms had broken at the shoulders and migrated to their back like wings. Just terrifying things. And just before they reached me, I woke up. The next day I told my mom about it and went into a great deal about the room. Turns out it was almost an exact copy of my room when I was a baby. We moved out of that house when I was super young. Like, I have no idea what the insides to any room look like. Just kinda weird, I guess. Edit. So I guess I have sleep paralysis. Cool. As I'm typing this, I already feel deja vu. I've always wanted to share this part of my life with someone, but have never been able to. So I'll just tell a bunch of people on the internet. One day I was walking to work and all of a sudden had an urge to walk a different path than usual. I work downtown in a big city. It was a strange spur-of-the-moment urge to walk a different way that changed my life forever. I turned into an alley I had never seen before. As I remember it, I made it about 15 feet or so when an actual glitch happened. Everything in my mind scrambled. I felt like I didn't have a body anymore, just that I was a semi-conscious entity floating through some weird dimension. All of a sudden, in the array of different colors and shapes, a vision came to me. It was a bunch of strange-looking people that in my mind resembled businessmen in suits. They looked startled and panicked that I could see them. One of the people made a quick movement and everything turned to black. When I regained normality, I was on a completely different street. It was the same street that I always used to walk to work. I felt sick and severely disturbed/depressed. I've never done any hard drugs, never experienced any hallucinations, never have had anything like this happen to me. The weird thing is, when the glitch was correcting itself and I could see those people watching me like a caged animal, I had the feeling that I knew I was being controlled. It still bothers me very much to this day. TLDR, had a moment of spontaneity, caused a real-life glitch, life has seemed different ever since. During a spinal tap procedure, I was put under. While under the anesthetics, I had what I can only explain as an out-of-body experience, seeing as how my viewpoint was from above my body, looking down on the procedure. I watched the whole thing and saw that the doctor knocked my Game Boy off the tabletop while walking by, batteries ejecting from the fall. One fell in sight and he picked it up, but the other was next to the front left wheel under the bed out of his view. But not mine. I woke up groggy and told him where my other battery was, and he was shocked when he found it there. To this day, it still weirds me out. When I was a teenager, I had two really intense dreams one night. The first one was about an online friend of mine calling me to say she'd broken up with a boyfriend, and I sang a few lines of Seal's Don't Cry to her over the phone. The second dream was finding a real-life friend's dead body floating in her bathtub. I didn't think anything of it up until I logged on that evening, and the online friend came online to tell me her boyfriend broke up with her. I immediately asked if I could call her, and she said no. I remember thinking that it meant something, like I could change it. Not long after, my phone rang, and it was the real-life friend from the dream calling me. I was completely freaked out at this point, but talked to her normally. She was just talking about school and things. Up until I realized I heard a splash in the background. I asked her, "Are you in the tub?" And when she said yes, I felt like my heart had stopped. I asked her, "What did you do?" She didn't answer me right away, and then after a very long pause, she told me she'd taken an entire bottle of pills and chased it with mushrooms and vodka. She'd gotten scared waiting for it to hit her, so she called me so she could hear someone's voice. I hung up and called 911. By the time they got there, she was unconscious but alive. Today, she's a mom to a beautiful little girl, and she's okay. About a year ago, my girlfriend and I went to eat dinner at Chipotle's. It's in a smallish shopping area with the burger joint and Payway neighboring the Chipotle, one of those kind of upper-classy type shopping areas. We pulled into the parking lot in front of the establishments at around 5 p.m. on a Friday evening to find an empty parking lot. There were no tables outside, there were no cars in the parking spots, not a person in sight, and even the lights inside the buildings were off. Completely confused, I took the car in a sort of loop around the building in order to leave. The only thing of interest was a single fire truck parked alongside the building, headlights on but no emergency lights, and no one in the truck. It struck us a little odd. Maybe a fire in the building? As we pull around the backside of the building and then finish looping around, we drive past the front facade of the building. Except this time, every parking spot is full, tables are outside with patrons at them, food half eaten. There's people walking around, and the lights inside the buildings are all on. But the fire truck was gone. Mind you, it took less than 30 seconds to make a circle around the building. Easily one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. More Adjustment Bureau than Matrix glitchy. I've posted this before elsewhere, but here goes. Sorry, this is a long read. I'm from Finland, and that's also where these things I'm about to describe to you happened. This was some years ago, pre-smartphone GPS era. It was the end of the summer, and myself and 2 friends were on a camping trip way up in the north in Lapland. The mosquito season was over, and the weather was cooling down in anticipation of the coming fall. The 3 of us had packed food and gear for a 10-day trek. The car we arrived in had been left at the parking lot of a visitor center. This happened within the premises of the Urho-Kekkonen National Park, a 985 square mile stretch of wilderness near the Russian border. The terrain there varies greatly, from treeless and semi-mountainous to dense forest of spruce and pine and dwarf birch. There are lots of swamps. Seeing reindeer is not uncommon, and some nights you might hear wolves in the distance. You could run into a bear or a wolverine in this place, but of course normally they avoid people. We mostly camped in a tent, but some nights we used shelters and simple huts provided for travelers free of charge. The trip had lasted 5 days. We were at the furthest of any kind of civilization when we were going to be on that particular outing, truly in the middle of nowhere. There really is nothing there. There are no villages, towns, or industry. The place is a national park after all. Seeing other hikers happen from time to time. You'd see some people in the distance maybe. Very rarely would you come face to face with anyone. So, in the middle of our trip, we were camped in a small clearing, woodland extending around us for a considerable distance in all directions. It was already dark, we had eaten our evening meal, and all 3 of us were jammed in our only tent. It was a bit cramped, but we fit. We took turns carrying it during the hikes. We were just exchanging some jokes and crude humor in the dark, like guys in their 20s do, about to go to sleep in our sleeping bags. When we quieted down, we began to hear it, talking, and the sound of machinery. Given our location, this was profoundly weird. We camped in a tent because there were no huts nearby. Maybe there was another camp somewhere near us? We couldn't quite make out what was being said, but it was a human voice, no doubt about it. But nothing really could explain the sound of heavy machinery. It sounded like an excavator or a tank, something big, powerful, and really not too far away. Combined with the sound of talking, we thought construction yard. But at that time of night, in an unpopulated protected nature reserve, we got out of our tent. It was cold and pitch black. The campfire had some coals still glowing. We took out our flashlights. My 2 buddies have always been a lot braver than me. The sound was clearly coming from the north, maybe half a kilometer away. We thought the construction might be going on behind a small hill some distance away. We could see no lights or anything. We still could not make out what was being said. The speaking-like voice was monotonous, and it was impossible even to say what language was being used. Still sounded a lot like a person speaking, though. You may be aware of the sort of spooky phenomenon of hearing a human voice in static. Maybe you've used a blow dryer and been sure someone is talking. Turn it off and it was just something the brain tried to interpret from the steady hum. Maybe it was sort of like that. It's hard to explain. The machinery-like sound continued, not loud, but you could sort of make out the powerful engine, at times accelerating or adding power, at times at idle. My 2 friends resolved to go find out what was going on. We put our warm clothes back on, donned boots, and I sat next to the dying fire, adding some more wood to it. I would stay at camp while my buddies left to check out this mystery construction yard in the middle of nowhere in the Lapland woods. So there I sat. The guys took out their maps, took a compass heading out, and left. I could hear them make their way through the forest and see the light fading from their flashlights. Then they were gone. The weird sounds continued, unaltered. They were gone 15 minutes, then maybe 30. Then the better part of an hour. It was odd, judging by the volume of the sound. They should have reached it, checked it out, and been back already. I added more firewood and tried to make out what the person talking was saying, but it was too tinny and obscure. The guys had been away for over 2 hours. I figured they had stayed for coffee with the construction guys or something. Then, the sound stopped. Just like that. It just ended all at the same time. The engine sound and the voice both just quit. It was very silent. I waited for another 30 minutes, very worried now that something bad had happened, that maybe my friends were lost. Should I go and try to find them? I shouted their names several times and built the fire pretty big. I was scared out of my mind when suddenly I saw the flashlights of my friends. Apparently they were returning in a hurry. The guys got back to camp out of breath. They told me the following. They had followed the sound beyond the small ridge in the distance. There was nothing there, and it seemed like they were not getting any closer to the source of the sounds. They had to stop every now and again, be quiet, and listen to it to be able to walk towards it. They walked and stopped like this for some time, then realized they were not getting any closer. The sounds did not change in volume at all. They decided to go just a bit further several times, when suddenly the sound just stopped like someone pressed a button on a recording. They realized they had been going on for a long time. They were in the middle of the dark woods, alone. They reversed the heading and started back at a brisk pace. Eventually, they saw my huge fire from the top of a hill and found their way back. The weird thing is, we seemed to think the sound stopped at different times. They had been gone 2.5 hours in total. They said the sound stopped at around the 1 hour 15 minute mark after they left. Then they started to head back immediately, return trip taking a bit longer, even though they kept a good pace. They apparently wandered around for a bit. For me, the sound stopped at the 2-hour mark, just 30 minutes before they returned. We did not sleep that night. Nothing more on that trip happened, and we never found out what the weird construction yard-like sound was about. When we returned to the park's visitor center some 5 days later, we asked around, but no one knew of any ongoing construction taking place in the whole national park area. It's been bugging me ever since.
What's the best movie theory ever? Skynet purposely lets humans survive because without them, it wouldn't have a purpose. There's enough nuclear weapons in the US arsenal to irradiate an entire planet, yet only relatively small amounts were launched by Skynet. After Judgment Day, Skynet could easily poison water supplies, raze every forest and farmland, and release biological and chemical weapons, making it impossible to survive. But they don't. I think the Terminator franchise is in a multiverse, and Skynet is aware of this. It keeps repeating the loop, thus optimizing itself and humanity in a sort of genetic algorithm. The ultimate goal is to create a unified, progressive humanity which is capable of accepting and integrating the machine intelligence, thus avoiding Judgment Day and elevating both groups as one. The tragedy of the series is humanity's relentless will to fight always results in its destruction, but a glimmer of hope remains, and after an infinite number of loops, the good ending must eventually occur. All of this stems from an iRobot premise where Skynet is acting to preserve humanity through misinterpreting its actions. Just to simplify this, it's Groundhog Day with killer robots, and John Connor is Bill Murray. I'm fond of the Back to the Future theory that Doc knew Marty died when Biff was about to run him down in his car at the end of the tunnel in the second movie. But there's no way he could have known to do that unless Marty got hit and died the first time, which prompted Doc to use the DeLorean to jump back to before that happened in order to use that knowledge to save him. Agent Smith is the One, not Neo. It is prophesied that the One would be born in the Matrix, able to bend it to their will, and would ultimately free all the humans. Smith, a program, was born in the Matrix, whereas Neo, a human, was born in those giant human farms the machines run. Smith totally took over the Matrix, like completely. Neo can fly and stop bullets and stuff, but that's nothing compared to Smith. He even joked, "You like what I've done with the place?" He made the Matrix completely his. Smith is more responsible for freeing the humans than Neo. The machines would never have agreed to free them all unless they were at Smith's mercy. Neo may have negotiated the deal, but it was Smith who made it possible. Plus, the Oracle even tells Neo that he's not the One, in the very first film. I'm going to go with a great Reddit gem from a few years back. The thing I really liked about Planes is that we learned that World War II happened in the Cars universe, which means that there was a Cars version of the Third Reich's leader, a Cars Holocaust, a Cars Pacific War, a Cars D-Day, a Cars nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a Cars tragedy of Nanking, a Cars battle of Iwo Jima. This leads to so many important questions. Were the Cars little boy and Fat Man nukes sentient? Was that a suicide mission? Are all Cars nuclear weapons sentient? Did Tsar Bomber have a personality? What kind of car was Car Führer of Germany? A VW? A forklift? Was there a Cars September the 11th? Were the planes hijacked, or were the planes themselves radicalized? I could go on. This post blew my mind, swept up the pieces, hurled them into an incinerator, burned the ashes, and fertilized the garden with them. Luke's success as a Jedi Knight, at least initially, was due to a stable home life. We all know the old order was flawed, but one of the biggest flaws was the way that they raised their Jedi children. They were taught that attachments were bad and should be avoided at all cost. One of the most brutal achievements the Jedi try to avoid is love. But avoiding love isn't easy, so the Jedi, taught to be blank emotionless knights, end up feeling the pull of attachments, which is fine until you lose that attachment. They are unable to cope because they were never taught to cope with loss, so they either accept that loss as the will of the Force, which is dispassionate and dangerous in its own right, or they let their grief control them. Luke, on the other hand, had a normal and stable childhood with loving adoptive parents, so Luke got to be raised in an environment where he wasn't taught to hide away from his emotions. He was raised in an environment where he could love, lose, and have a shoulder to cry on. It made him emotionally stable, so when the dark side calls to him, he doesn't fall as easily as every other Jedi in the history of the galaxy. Also, the thing that Jedi do preach, he has actually experienced. They're always going on about compassion, but that's a rote to them. Luke has actually experienced true compassion and love. So to sum up, Jedi should be allowed to bone. The Avatar: The Last Airbender movie was not about the Avatar series, but the play they watched in the theater in the Fire Nation. This is the closest that abomination will ever come to being redeemed in the narrator's eyes. that the Spy Kids movies take place within the Tarantino universe. Because it's directed by Robert Rodriguez, there are elements of the Machete-verse present, namely that Machete is the protagonist's frickin' uncle. There's plenty of material that connects the Rodriguez universe with the Tarantino movies, but if you watch Rodriguez's kids' movies, Spy Kids 1, 2, and 3, as well as Shark Boy and Lava Girl, there are little Tarantino details like Big Kahuna burgers and such. Max in Mad Max Fury Road was actually the kid from Road Warrior who emulated the original Max. He only gives his name at the very end because he's finally acting like a hero, and now he feels he's worthy of the name Max. It explains the differences in looks, the problems in continuity, and why Max isn't as old as a Morton Joe. The monsters in Cloverfield were specifically targeting people who drank the energy drink that Rob worked for. At one point, Hud says, "It's almost like they were trying to carry me away," and earlier in the film he mentioned that he drank a lot of the stuff. It is interesting that because the monsters were killing everybody upon sight, but they began dragging him away instead. Viral marketing campaign for the movie was deep, and though we learned that the energy drink company was also drilling the ocean floor, and likely using that stuff in drinks, so a giant monster coming out of the ocean and targeting people who've consumed these weird ocean floor ingredients isn't all that insane. Also, in the film, they show a satellite crash into the ocean, if you look closely. I think this is a trick to make casual viewers think it was just the satellite that woke the monster, and this is what most fans online believed when the film was popular. But I'm pretty certain it was that Japanese drilling/drink company, and even then I'm sure there are way more details I don't remember. I guess this all counts as a theory because it was put together from fake MySpace profiles and websites, manipulating audio files and stuff like that. Not much audio was in the actual film. I definitely do think there was something to the fact that the monsters tried to carry Hud away instead of just killing him, and if I remember correctly, it was the main monster that finally snatched him up and ate him, rather than just ripping him apart or something. The Prestige is Christopher Nolan's sneaky way of revealing the secret of Christian Bale's life. How does he go from nearly dead to Batman to fat back to fit in just months? It's not through diet and exercise. He has a skinny twin hidden away. When a role calls for a skinny Christian Bale, his brother fills in. They each share one life. How does Leo DiCaprio keep getting choice movie roles and date the hottest chicks? It's not just through talent and good looks. He's a real-life inceptioner. The Rock universe. Every movie where Dwayne Johnson's bull tattoo appears are part of the same universe. The Fast and the Furious franchise is the same universe as Baywatch. Rampage is a direct sequel to San Andreas, but Moana and the Mummy franchise are not a part of the universe. My theory is about The Room. I believe Johnny is actually a mentally handicapped individual, and Lisa and Mark are his caretakers. Denny is another handicapped kid who lives at the facility. The story is told from Johnny's point of view, and he doesn't realize that he is essentially handicapped and believes he's in a relationship with Lisa. Lisa and Mark are in fact in a relationship, and the movie is just Johnny's interpretation of what is occurring. Meanwhile, he's simply living in a care facility. That's why everyone lives in the same apartment building. Quentin Tarantino's Top Gun is a gay romance theory. There are two types of men after watching that volleyball scene, the gay and the blind. I've seen gay porn that's not as homoerotic as that volleyball scene. Birdman didn't actually survive his suicide on stage. The hospital scene in the end was just Riggins' dream scenario. His wife defending him, his best friend being excited for their success, their play being a success, his daughter bringing the correct flowers, him being on the front page of the newspaper and getting noticed on TV, and finally, him being Birdman. My bros theory. After the Home Alones, Kevin runs away and is eventually taken in by a family that already has a son and a daughter. Distraught by the fact that his actual family has forgotten about him once more, he decides to terrorize his new family in The Good Son. The Joker in The Dark Knight is an ex-soldier/special forces operative, hence why he's skilled with various different weapons, guns, rocket launchers, etc. He also seems to have some knowledge of how to interrogate people, given his comments when Batman interrogates him. Ex-cop or military makes sense. Also, don't forget the scene where he's in uniform but not in makeup. A war wound would also explain the scars. Maybe he was tortured until he broke. Aladdin takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, 10,000 years past current times. That is why the world is a desert, and the genie, having just been freed from the lamp, references pop culture in the 20th century. I wouldn't call it the best, but it's certainly the only plausible fan theory I've ever come up with on my own. In Independence Day, when Russell Case almost sets off the missile in the hangar, but then aborts the launch, it causes the squibs to malfunction, and that's why he wasn't able to fire his last missile at the ship. I'm in aviation, but I'm not an armament guy, but I'm fairly certain that's not how that works at all. But I've come up with the theory on my own, and I like it. In the first episode of Pokemon, Ash sees Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is said to grant the trainers who see him eternal happiness. Ash's idea of eternal happiness was probably to travel around the world of Pokemon forever, so he is always 10 throughout the series. Furthermore, the reason he never wins the Pokemon League, because he would probably stop traveling as he would be the champion and end his journey. Mace Windu is Emperor Snoke. These aren't spoilers of the new film, FYI, as this wasn't even addressed. Mace Windu was a promoter of both the dark and light. The color of the lightsaber is violet, a symbolic representation of light and dark. Jedis have notoriously been difficult to kill by falling in past films, and Windu could have been seriously disfigured from the Force lightning. Willy Wonka is a serial killer. If you think about it, as we discussed with some friends after watching Christmas Eve, he's a recluse that just randomly decided to open up to the public, and all these kids managed to fall into the midst of arguably fatal experiences. There were also only 8 seats in the boat, not 10, and only 4 seats in the Wonka car. The grand prize winner is the last one alive. The Wonkavator is never shown to have landed. This could suggest that he intended to kill Charlie, and possibly himself, as well. We just never see it crash. This is a movie theory thread. The books have no power here. Inception wedding ring. In the film, anytime Leonardo DiCaprio has a wedding ring on, he is in a dream. That is his true totem, not the spinning top. From what I have watched, it seems to hold up, and gives the ending a proper resolution. In the 2009 Star Trek reboot and one of the sequels, the song Sabotage by the Beastie Boys plays. Therefore, the Beastie Boys exist in the Star Trek universe. However, the Beastie Boys have another song called Intergalactic, which contains the lyric, "like a pinch on the neck from Mr. Spock." The theory to reconcile this is that in Star Trek IV, the crew of the main timeline Enterprise go back to 1986, before the timelines diverged, on a quest to find some humpback whales, during which time Kirk and Spock take a bus, and Spock neckpinches a punk. The theory being that a young Beastie Boy was on the bus and witnessed the strange interaction, then wrote about it. That the Flintstones is actually the future of the Jetsons universe, after a great holocaust devastates their utopian world and knocks everyone back to the Stone Age. Fred and Barney and the gang have all kinds of technological concepts that true Stone Age people wouldn't even be aware of. The theory that nearly the entirety of Greece is Sandy's coma dream after the drowning. Danny saving her is where the coma begins, and them in a car flying away at the end is Sandy dying in her coma and ascending to heaven. It actually makes the movie much more bearable for me. There are numerous theories like this in the Reddit thread, and the general response is that the "it's all a dream/hallucination" theory is a cop-out. I think Greece might be the one exception that proves the rule. Not film, but TV. Malcolm in the Middle's dad, Hal, and Breaking Bad's Walter White are the same actor and the same character. Similarly, Modern Family is the continuing story of Married with Children. Character names changed to avoid copyright issues. I like the theory that Malcolm is actually Walter. That's why we never see his parents. He was embarrassed by them. He grew up poor and hated getting handouts, which is why he didn't want help from grey matter. When Malcolm is a kid, we see how poorly he handles money, because they never really had any. So when he makes enough money from his drugs for his treatment, he can't stop and keeps going with it, all the while knowing that he's putting himself and his family in danger. As much as I like Hal, I can't see him as Walter. He can't even bring himself to work a full week for almost 15 years, so I can't see him starting a company and making all that money with grey matter, and then teaching. Plus, he'd have gotten away from Lois, and the only way that happens is if she dies, and even then he's so whipped and in love with her, I don't see him being able to move on to another woman. The real antagonist of Avengers 1, Loki, absolutely punked everyone and won. Thor 1. Loki gets the boot from Asgard, banished by the Allfather and ordered never to return. Avengers 1. Loki apparently gets stomped and is given a first-class, incredibly safe, one-way Bifrost ticket straight to Asgard to be locked up. Thor 2. Loki is in the White Room executive suite of jail cells with all the reading material he could ever want. When the time is right, he sneaks his way back, hatches his plan, taking the throne. His goal from Thor 1. Thor Ragnarok. Loki is chilling like a villain. Everything is awesome for him because everything worked out just as planned. What would have happened if he had just tried to defy Odin and stomp back into Asgard? Heimdall would have known right off the bat and smacked him around, and then he'd have had all the rest of the AITA there in a heartbeat. No. Loki got himself invited back to Asgard with a royal procession on the orders of Odin himself. Loki wins. It's just what he does. It's important to note that this post was released just after the Ragnarok film and before Endgame. Still, he did get power before all that went down. Anakin has a really weird way of flirting with Padme in Attack of the Clones, and we're not really sure why it works when he says things like, "I don't like sand," to attract her. Since Anakin is the chosen one and the most powerful Force user anyone has ever seen, it's possible that he was a Jedi mind-tricking her into loving him intentionally. Even his hand is up right before they kiss, signaling there could be some Force action going on. Peter Pan kills the Lost Boys when they get too old. Captain Hook knows this, and that's why he's always after Peter. I guess that isn't the best, but it's the one that's always stuck with me, and killed my inner child. It's more or less stated in the book, quote, "The boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according as they get killed and so on, and when they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out. But at this time there were 6 of them, counting the twins as 2. I've seen this theory before, but in researching this video I found that it's actually in fact confirmed as a canon possibility by the scholars of the book, which is truly horrifying. In Home Alone, Kevin's mum says that she would sell her soul to the devil himself to see her son. The devil, played by John Candy, immediately appears and takes her back to the house in suburban Chicago. On the way, he plays a jaunty song on his clarinet to celebrate the soul he's just claimed. That Anakin brought balance to the Force by striking down the Jedi. There were about 2 prominent Sith and Jedi alive by the end of the prequels. This is TV, but that Toby is the Scranton Strangler. There's way too many details to put on here, you can just Google them, sorry. I heard Toby was originally one of the writers, and they just wrote him in as a joke. Makes sense they would put him in as a serial strangler. Maybe not. That Han Solo killed himself with Kylo's lightsaber, knowing that Snoke would kill Kylo if the job wasn't done. He sacrificed himself so that his son wouldn't be hurt by Snoke. That Ant-Man is in every Marvel movie. Who would know? Pan's Labyrinth is in a parallel world version of Labyrinth, where a young girl must always choose whether or not to sacrifice her baby stepbrother to the mythical creature, while undergoing tests such as eating forbidden fruit, being chased through tunnels, and watching fairies get murdered. The cycle cannot be broken until she actually does it. Glinda was the real villain of The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's house crushes the so-called Wicked Witch of the East, and her sister shows up to claim the shoes of her now deceased sister, possibly her last family member in Oz. Of course she's going to be grouchy, her sister just died. Yet Glinda has the gall to deny her sister's shoes and say, "They're probably really powerful, she wouldn't want them if they weren't," ignoring the fact that they rightfully belong to the Wicked Witch of the West since they were her sisters, and maybe she wants the clothing items that were just stolen from her still warm corpse. So Glinda sends a child off alone to find the wizard, who tells said child that she just needs to go murder the scary witch who is in a rage because her sister just died. In the end, Dorothy manages to defeat the Wicked Witch and bring the broom back to the fake wizard, who then accidentally leaves her behind. But it's okay, because Glinda reveals that the shoes could have taken her home all along with the reasoning that, "You wouldn't have believed me." Dorothy was just magically transported into a colourful world where a good witch flew in on a bubble and a bunch of short people sang a happy song about a woman dying. I think she would have believed Glinda if she told her that the shoes were magical at that point. My theory is that Glinda was playing a masterful game, using everyone else as pawns. As a result of her actions, the Wicked Witch of the West is dead and the Wizard of Oz is gone. This leaves a power vacuum that can be filled by Glinda, now the most powerful magical being in Oz. Why would she have forced Dorothy to go on a perilous journey if she was just trying to help? She clearly had sinister motives. Not a movie, but Rick from Rick and Morty is suicidal because he knows he's in a pointless TV show for our entertainment, and nothing he ever does matters. His catchphrase, "Wubba lubba dub dub," even means, "I'm in great pain," according to Bird Person. The never-ending story. The old man who first owns the book in the movie is dying, and that's why Fantasia is falling apart. Since the movie depends on the reader to continue the story, his health condition was reflected in the events that take place in the movie. As far as what condition that man may have, it could be anything. However, since the nothing seems to be erasing everything from existence, it's probably a brain issue. When Bastian starts reading the book, a young boy, Atreyu, is sent forth to save the land. And since Bastian is a new reader with no life-threatening ailment, technically, he is the savior, which is why Atreyu saw Bastian in the Mirror Gate after passing through the Gold Sphinx Gate to get to the Southern Oracle. I don't know if this is a known theory or common knowledge, but it occurred to me the last time I watched the film, and I had never thought of it before. It made sense to me. Angry Birds is a film about the effects of immigration. The pigs come in and steal away the birds' future, eggs, so the birds need to learn to man up and defend their borders. This is not intended to spark political debate. I don't care if you like immigration or not.
Cops of Reddit. What's the stupidest thing or crime someone did right in front of you? I worked as a small-town sheriff's deputy in a rural country. One night, I was running code to a domestic disturbance at a home a couple miles away. I was cresting a hill and noticed a pair of headlights in my lane of travel on a 2-lane road. I pulled up and noticed a beat-up old yellow pickup truck with the driver's side door open facing me and blocking the road. I then noticed a disheveled-looking man standing in the ditch, sheepishly holding an obviously upset raccoon by the tail. I stepped out of the car and yelled to the man politely, inquiring as to what was happening. He shrugged his shoulders and yelled, "Sorry, forensic Sasquatch," before pitching the raccoon into the bushes. I didn't have time to ask questions, but told him to move the car out of the way so I could get to my domestic. Months later, I ran into the gentleman in town and he introduced himself as the raccoon guy. I asked him what had happened and he told me, "I was driving along and saw 2 raccoons trying to get into the same culvert and they got stuck. I told myself, I'll bet I could grab one of them if I tried, and went and grabbed him by the tail. Ooh, boy, was he sure mad." I asked him what he was planning to do with the raccoon, and he just shrugged and gave me a quizzical look. My roommate was a cop. We were walking home after work. I passed right by the station on my way home, and she'd usually join me. She was still in uniform, badge and all. We passed by a liquor store, and a group of kids surrounded us and asked us to buy them liquor. She said, "How old are you?" They said, 16. That's why we can't buy it ourselves. She asked them after she arrested them why they'd approach a uniformed police officer of all people. Their answer, "We didn't think you were a real cop because you're a woman." Wow! So these children must be very educated. Someone please cue the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song as they're all just being arrested and handcuffed behind them. Bum, bum, bum. You kids are dumb and you're going to jail. You're going to be in juvie with the record. Oh, geez. So many. Probably the guy who asked me how much illegal substances I wanted to buy. I was in full uniform, but he was looking down counting the rocks in his palm at night. I laughed and said, "I'll take all of it." He said, "That's going to be like $50 then." As he looked up at me, realizing the error in his ways upon seeing me, he ate them all. He got out of going to jail right then, but got a warrant for destroying evidence and arrived to the hospital to have his stomach pumped. So, kind of worth it for him, I guess. We just went through this literally last time. Bum, bum, bum. You're not going to jail, but you're going to go in the hospital having your stomach pumped because you are stupid. Part of my Joker laugh there. Driving down a 2-way road, 1 lane each way. Car up ahead of me on my lane makes a U-turn from the curb. He was parked. Then proceeds to swerve towards my lane, driving on the wrong side of the road. I slow down. He honks at me as if I'm in his way. He swerves back to his lane and keeps driving. I stop him ultimately after he hit the curb trying to pull over. Yup, guess who got a DUI? Not a cop, but I was behind the Dumbo who did it in front of the cop. Near my mom's house is a bunch of horse property, so it's normal to see guys go by on their horses. I was behind a black SUV and see a police car parked facing the street. The Dumbo in the SUV slowed down just to veer closer and rev his engine at the horses. One was calm, but the other was freaking out. The cop's sirens came on so fast, it surprised me. Guy got his horse under control, and the Dumbo in the SUV got pulled over. I deal with stupid every day at work, but here's one that I always like to tell. Back when I was working gang units, we were in a residential neighborhood in East LA at night. We hear a car do a huge, long burnout. It sounded really close. We turn off our lights and wait for some weapon fire, but never heard any. Just then, a car goes flying by us. We turn on the lights and go after him. He pulls over right away and starts apologizing to us, saying that his foot slipped off the clutch. Yeah, right. A burnout that long and your foot slipped? Turns out, he just broken up with his girlfriend and he went to her house to do the burnout in front of it. Now, the interesting thing about working gangs is we don't do traffic or answer calls unless it is gang-related. We muck with gang members. But we had to stop because of what he did in the neighborhood we were in. Since this guy wasn't a gang member, we were just going to let him go. We hadn't even run his license or even asked for it yet. Now here is where it gets stupid. He looks at us and says, "Can I ask you something before you take me to jail?" My partner and I look at each other, ask him for his ID, and run it. Turns out, he had a $15,000 warrant for his arrest. He was seconds away from going home and ended up in jail that night. Funny thing is, I don't think he ever asked the question. I was military police, and this happened back in 2012. I was doing a routine building check on one of the schools on base. Due to our security posture that day, I was in full battle rattle and had my piece with me at 6'2" and 220 pounds. I am an enormous person with all that body armor and such on. I turn the corner to check the backside of the school and see two teenagers sitting on a picnic table outside one of the doors. Mind you, this is a Saturday, so there's nobody in the building. The kid sees me, a giant wall of weaponry, and immediately throws something under the little PE shed. My first thought was the leaf. We're on a military base, you can't have that crap. So I asked the kid what he just threw, and he immediately starts crying. The girl he was with had such a bewildered look in her face at the sight of him breaking down like that. Admittedly, I was also a bit surprised. The girl was 16 and the guy was 15. She told me that it was just a cigarette, so I made the boy fish it out from under the shed. Sure enough, it was just a Camel Crush cig. Not even broken yet. "Are your parents home?" I asked the boy. He shook his head. You live on base, right? Go smoke these in your dad's garage. It's Saturday anyway. Why are you here in school property? I'm not going to arrest you." Suddenly he stopped crying and started praising me for being the coolest cop ever and thanking me for not bringing him in, as if smoking a cig was a huge deal on a military base full of nuclear weapons. Later that day, coincidentally, also on school building check, I found two 14-year-old boys sitting against the wall eating honeysuckle flower petals. So that was weird. I was out at a client's site to burn some camera footage for the police, and due to the slow DVD burner, I found myself outside having a smoke break with the detective that came to collect it. We were shooting the crap back and forth about the weather when a homeless guy walked up and asked for a light. Duct tape jacket and shoes? Check. Overpowering smell of mold, waste, and burning tires? Check. While I was doing the mental math of, is this guy likely to try a runner with my Zippo in front of a cop? The detective produced a book of matches and told him to keep them. The homeless guy walked 10 feet away to an illegally parked Crown Vic belonging to the cop, sat on the hood, and started emptying his pockets. An illegal substance pipe, 2 Bic lighters, 1 crushed pack of illegal substances, and a handful of plastic baggies. Detective elbowing me and whispering, "He's lucky I have places to be." Finally, the guy found what he was looking for, a pathetic little pinner of an herbal leaf, wedged in the cigarette pack and lit up using one of the lighters. Detective still whispering, "Bet he doesn't even share." I let out a snort, which the homeless guy apparently didn't appreciate. He looked straight at me, then straight at the cop, and the flash would have lost to this 90-pound white dude in duct tape shoes. He was half a block away and around the corner before his rolled-up leaf stopped rolling around on the sidewalk. I was training a rookie. We were the same unit with the same designator, a radio call sign. I called dispatch my police radio. 240 Alpha is what I said, indicating that we, 240 Alpha, were calling dispatch. My rookie was standing directly next to me, like right beside me. He got on the radio and said, 240 Alpha, go ahead. Thinking the dispatcher was calling him. In short, he answered himself on the radio. The dispatcher was confused. I wonder how long they kept him like that after he said what he said. I just want to know if they were just staring at him the whole while. Oh boy,
This isn't good. Dispatcher's gone quiet. What do we do, sir?
I don't know. Why don't you ask him again? And just may I remind you, do you see this piece of paper?
Yeah?
What does it say right there?
240 Alpha. Yeah, I know.
Uh-huh. And do you see the names beneath that?
Well, hey, wait a minute. That's my name. Oh, that's my name.
Yeah, that's your name. My agency is the primary agency responsible for boat patrol in my area. One July weekend, my partner and I are just beginning an afternoon shift on the water when another boater flags us down. We make our way over, expecting them to be having mechanical trouble or something. Nope. 2 guys on board, and the operator tells us he wants us to write him a ticket for his expired registration. Says he was just given a warning last weekend and knew we'd catch him anyway. So, might as well get it over with. Pretty good, right? Not done. Eventually, we put our boat on the lift and get off the water to grab dinner. While eating, we get a call from dispatch that a boater had just called in a complaint about another boat that was operating dangerously and nearly caused an accident. We make our way back there, and sure enough, it's the boat from earlier. Turns out they had asked us to write them a ticket earlier because they thought that would keep us from stopping them later after they had gotten intoxicated. Didn't want that OWI, and still not done. This time, when we stopped them, there was an additional person on board, an intoxicated girl that they allowed to operate their boat. We check her ID, says she's 22, but can't get a return on it. It's fake. She's underage, and they knew it. Now she's going to jail for OWI, among other things, and they're getting charged with furnishing alcohol to a minor. Good thing they got that registration ticket out of the way earlier. I am completely unsurprised. Just about every boater at the marina I live near are alcoholics that do stupid crap just like this. My mother does security at an abandoned waterfront hotel, and every single freaking time she has to tell half those boaters, abandoned private property for your own safety, there's no trespassing, even though they've been there 15 times before, just because they were too crap-faced last time to remember. And every time they're like, "What? Really? No way!" Like they can't believe the place is dangerous, even though the place is literally falling in on itself. There was this one guy who would stand on property and talk to her for 5 to 15 minutes, despite being told to leave and getting no reception from her. Then she called 911 after watching him book it from one of the rooms and finding a lab inside. Since she knew him, she was able to point to which boat he lived in, and he was getting arrested. He was like, "But I thought we were cool!" No, not even a little bit. Especially not cover up your illegal substance lab and probably become a felon in the process. Cool. Not a cop, but I saw it happen. I worked at a pretty busy nightclub and I watched a man pick up a woman's purse and walk away with it, out toward the parking lot. I saw him get into the passenger side of a vehicle by himself with the purse. I informed one of the off-duty police officers that we'd hire for security. The officer approached the vehicle and turns his flashlight on to catch the guy in the middle of taking a Snapchat video of himself chugging cheap vodka. Turns out, it was his cousin's purse and he needed the car keys. Stupid thing is it was dollar drink night, so how much was he really even saving? At least he got a good Snapchat out of it. Not a cop, but one day a massive water main burst in town and knocked out a couple streets. They put the cops in the ends to make sure nobody went down them. I was driving on a late afternoon and nobody else was really around, so pretty quiet. A young female cop was standing on the corner when over the road from her, some guy wandering down the street jumps up and starts swinging from the road closure sign and then pulled it down. The look on her face was one of pure, "Are you freaking kidding me right now?" Drove off before anything else happened, but I imagine that went poorly for him. 2 of my cousins are in their last year of cop school, so this summer they visited us from the city, and my dad took them fishing at the local lake. Some tourists in an RV were camped illegally. Doesn't bother us locals since it is out of the way, and hadn't had any luck fishing. They saw the catch my dad was carrying and asked if they could buy it. He said he could give it to them for free since we already had dinner. The tourists then gave my dad at least 5 big cartons of cigarettes as payment. And it is almost 100% smuggler goods from the border. My dad turned around and saw my 2 cousins literally sitting on the ground laughing. My partner was writing a ticket while I was documenting the stop via the patrol car's computer. We were on a city street next to a dramatically curved freeway off-ramp. We hear a tremendously loud screeching of brakes and a crashing sound that went on for a few seconds. We turn around and an SUV is on its roof. A tire is rolling across the intersection. We put it out over the air and run over. I looked inside my flashlight and there were multiple bodies all over the SUV. The fire department arrived and cut them out. They were all badly injured and the driver was gone. Drive safe and pay attention, guys. There's a reason my partner was writing a freaking speeding ticket. Not a cop, but was a teenager who did something stupid. My buddy and I were at a stoplight in Princeton, New Jersey, one summer evening, and a town cop pulls up next to us, and for some unknown reason, I turned to my buddy and said, "Hey Dave, put away that illegal substance pipe." Needless to say, we get immediately pulled over and 3 more cops come rolling up. Not hard. We were also 50 yards from the police station. My buddy's car was registered in PA, so it was extra special for the cops. Neither my buddy nor the cops were terribly happy with me that day. After a thorough search of our persons and the car, where nothing illegal was found, the cop turns to me and says, "In the future, you should make sure your hummingbird rump doesn't get in the way of your crocodile mouth." I still laugh about it to this day. This was sometime around 1992. Opposite side of the story, officer pulled me over for driving through downtown with my brights on at 2 a.m. Intoxicated, I reach out to turn them off. As he told me why he pulled me over, I hit my windshield washers instead and sprayed him. He let me go, but he followed me as I drove around the block to drop off a buddy. Pulled in behind my friend's car so he can go home. He literally falls out of my car, beer in hand, 6-pack in the other. Lights come on, and the cop gets out and approaches us. Turns out my buddy was his training officer. Lets us both go with the promise that we aren't going anywhere until we sober up. I walked across the street to a friend's place. Cop leaves. Buddy takes off. Not really a cop, but maybe the cop who handled me will remember this story. Picked up Call of Duty at a GameStop, which was quite a drive away from me, and I wasn't too familiar with the area. The main street had a ton of traffic, so I decided to use side streets without looking at my GPS and ended up driving into what looked like an abandoned factory. Had no clue where I was, but I drove slowly past the open gate, which appeared unattended at the moment, and attempted to make a U-turn back out. Right as I'm about to exit, the cop holds out his hand and yells, "Hey you! What do you think you're doing?" I had no clue where I was, but I knew I mucked up. I rolled down the window and the officer, in a very distinct Australian accent, says, "So, you enjoy running stop signs?" Had no clue there was a stop sign, but I didn't make a complete stop, so I just felt a huge fine coming my way. Told him I had no clue where I was and that I was really sorry. I just wanted to play some video games, man. He goes on to tell me that I was in the DWP, Department of Water and Power, and if I drove any further down, the guards were authorized to shoot me and that I could have been terminated since they were on red alert. After he asks me to pull over and check my license plate, make and model, etc., he tells me that they'll send my info to the FBI and look for any infractions or criminal records. None, by the way, but okay. Told him again I was sorry, and dude just kept saying, "Leave, leave, leave." I feel for the man because I'm sure he might have lost his job, but he let me go with a slap on the wrist and my body intact. Got extremely lucky, and now I always use GPS if I'm not at least 75% familiar with the area. Hope he's doing well, I owe him. But I swear something felt off. But in the heat of the moment, I was honestly dumbfounded. He seemed more annoyed of me and couldn't wait for me to leave, but I don't really know what was happening on his end. That quote about getting shot at stuck with me as he explicitly told me I'd be terminated. And I don't usually hear cops talk about the FBI investigating, but this is government property, so, I just rolled with it. Also, that Call of Duty died out in a month. It was World War II. Overall, not a worthwhile game. What? That's what you got out of this whole scenario? You were threatened that you were going to get shot by a very angry Australian man who was dressed as a police officer and talking about the FBI and how you could have lost your life. But the last thing that you threw in there is, Well, the worst part is that Call of Duty sucked. I mean, what? I would say I'm just glad that you're alive. As a teenager, my friend and I were jaywalking. We got to the center divider when a cop drove by, then made a U-turn, and we stupidly started running and ran up into a parking structure. We were on the roof when 3 cop cars came up, surrounded us with weapons drawn, telling us to put our hands up. They asked why we ran, and we said we didn't know, which we really didn't. We just ran. They searched us, and I had some candy in my pocket, which they asked what I was holding. It was gummy bears. They let us go with a warning. I thought I was pretty stupid. Man, how terrible would it be if the cops were like, and we're going to take this under suspicious activity. Make sure that these gummies aren't filled with anything illegal. Yeah. All right, be on your way. Guys, look, I just got free candy.
Patients of Reddit. What happened when a doctor or nurse accused you of faking it when you were actually in need of urgent medical care? My friend's dad went to the ER and the doctor said he was fine after minimal examination. Her dad insisted something was wrong and said he wouldn't leave until they ran some tests. As he was being escorted out by security, he had a brain aneurysm and died. Her family was awarded a pretty massive malpractice settlement, but they were absolutely devastated. I fell down a flight of stairs one time while working, hit a nail on the way down and ripped my forearm open and was bleeding a good bit. Adrenaline had me going long enough for my girlfriend, a nurse at another hospital, to drive me there. I had a bloody paper towel on my arm and all the security guards and nurses assumed I was a junkie that blew a vein. Finally, all the hype wore off and I kinda passed out and woke up in a wheelchair in the exam room. I don't know exactly what happened, but my girlfriend was flipping out on the workers. She said half of them assumed I was on drugs and the other half thought I was faking it to skip the line. I wasn't dying of blood loss or anything. I just got woozy when I actually was able to see the meat in my arm for the first time. They all just watched me as I fell to the floor and busted my head on the floor. Even then, they didn't do anything. My girlfriend, who's not even half my size as I'm not a small guy at all, had to pick me up and drag me into the wheelchair. Screw that hospital. Not as a patient, but as a parent of a patient. My wife and I started to suspect that something was wrong with our son starting at age 2. He would run around all day and was an active little guy but never sweat. He also never appeared to get cold. We live in New England and he would often take his shirt off before going to sleep even in the winter months. These concerns were dismissed as a toddlers are weird sort of thing by his doctor. We later noticed that he would stop and complain about his hands or feet hurting while playing or laying in bed. These were also dismissed. We were told that the pain in his feet could be because his feet are flat or because of growing pains. We were told that it could also be attention related. The doctor said that it's not uncommon for middle children to act out. This continued for 4 years. My sister is a biologist and asked us if we ever got him checked for Fabry disease. I flat out asked the doctor if he could be tested, and the doctor told us that there was no way this was Fabry, and they weren't going to test a kid without any genetic history of the disorder. The disorder is genetic, and without a classic sign, one that often doesn't show up until adulthood, if it shows up at all. We waited until our son was literally screaming in bed about how his hands and feet feeling like they were on fire. We demanded to get him tested, and he was diagnosed with Fabry. It's essentially a metabolic disorder caused by a missing enzyme. There are many issues associated with it, but the main one is extreme neuropathic pain in the hands and feet. The pain can be random, but with my son, it is normally because he overheated since he lacks the ability to sweat. He plays sports, so we have to be careful. Overactivity and fevers have to be watched out for since his body can't cool itself down. Pain can last anywhere from a couple of minutes to a couple of days. The average age of this diagnosis for this disorder is around 16, so it's not surprising that his doctor missed it. Most doctors do since it's a rare disorder. That was a little over a year ago, and my son is doing well now. There is no cure, but treatment allows him to live a relatively normal life with some added pain. I couldn't imagine making him wait until his teens to get any relief. I was in labor, and because it was my first, they acted like I had no idea what was happening and kept denying what I was insisting. I was over 2 months early and handled pain so well, they acted like it was just in my head. Made me stand at the counter filling out paperwork while I insisted I needed to push. They decided to lay me down to check if I had even started dilating, and I promptly pushed him out. I was furious with how I was treated. I still am. My mother had a stroke at age 32. The doctors didn't diagnose it properly for over 24 hours because they were convinced her symptoms must have been related to drugs since she was in good health and so young. My dad apparently tried to tell them that she has no history of drug use, but they didn't believe him. Now, she's permanently disabled because of how long it took for her to receive proper treatment. Not me, but my best friend nearly died of a kidney infection that her doctor brushed off as period cramps. Not me, but my mother. She had called an ambulance because she had been experiencing chest pains, to which they basically told her she was crazy. About a month later, She passed away from a heart attack. When I was in labor, the hospital had my records wrong and showed I was due a month later. I was ticked, especially since I was in labor and in a lot of pain. The lady kept arguing until she realized I was in labor. She must have heard all the crap my boyfriend, now husband, were talking about her. Happened to my mom. They told her she was having an anxiety attack. She was having a heart attack. Was 12 years old and had a heart problem that was just starting to show. Arrhythmia and palpitations. Only happened when overexerting myself. Go to cardiologist and was accused of faking it to get out of chores and soccer practice. By the time I'm 15, my heart is absolutely unreliable throughout the day. During an attack, I would lose my sight and pass out. Sane cardiologists still claimed I was faking it. Kids just don't have heart conditions. 16 years old and my heart finally stops. Luckily, I passed out earlier at school and was in the nurse's office when my heart stopped after another episode. Woke up in the hospital and, by the way, had a heart deformation that required surgery. My mother blew her lid, according to my doctor, of wanting to see me dead. Went to his office and threw his degrees and awards office wall at him and was screaming at him. Only reason she didn't sue was to prevent assault charges. Simple echocardiograph showed growth causing the electricity to pump my heart to go into circles. Wasn't fun having heart attack simulations nearly every day for 4 years. Before anyone asks, was poor and that cardiologist was the only one on my mother's insurance. To my doctor's credit, we both kind of had a laugh at this before the test results came back. I went to my primary because I had been experiencing hot flashes. Dr. Google couldn't tell me what was wrong, and I knew it didn't feel right. Well, at least we know it wasn't menopause, my doctor joked. I laughed. What 23-year-old woman spontaneously goes through menopause? This one. My doctor was very apologetic. I'm on hormone therapy now and doing fine. Luckily didn't end up with any crazy negative side effects, but could have if my doctor didn't run a full workup just to be safe. Changing it up just a little, my colleagues were convinced a girl was just faking a stomachache. She was about 16 years old and it was exam season, a time when we would get many sudden tummy aches, fits, etc., so I understood their skepticism, but something didn't sit right with me. I took her history myself and sent her for an emergency ultrasound of her abdomen, ectopic pregnancy. I was ready to rupture at any moment, so I shipped her over to OBS/GYN to get surgery ASAP. She came out just fine, but man oh man did I give my coworkers a hard time after that. Exam season or not, we need to be thorough. Had another time when it was just me and one other doctor working admission. She dismissed a case of a little girl faking fatigue for attention. Thankfully, I overheard her telling someone, so I went to double check. The poor girl was having a carpopedal spasm and was most definitely not faking her condition. Hooked her up to some calcium and sent her home with meds the next day. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm perfect, but in our line of work, we must always be a little paranoid. I wouldn't really say they didn't believe that I was in pain, but didn't believe how much pain I was in. In February 2016, I started getting side cramps. I went to the ER, they said I had a tiny ovarian cyst. Okay, cool. I've had those before. In March 2016, I started my period and it continued until June. Between March and May, I went to at least 7 doctor's offices and ERs. I've had several ultrasounds and always had about 5 to 6 cysts spread between both of my ovaries. I was told I was too young. You're only 23, we don't want to take the cysts out because it could damage your ovaries, or you could lose one or both if something goes wrong, and what if you want to have kids one day? And on one instance, it's a Saturday and we don't feel like calling a surgeon in. I was calling off work or leaving early at least once a week. I always had a portable heating pad on and taking pretty heavy pain pills. In May 2016, I finally found a doctor who would do exploratory surgery on me. He pretty much opened me up, went, "Holy crap," and closed me back up. I then had to have a major surgery a couple weeks later because my left ovary had eaten the cysts and was attaching itself to my colon and artery in my leg. So I ended up losing my ovary anyway. I did throw a see you later ovulator party before my big surgery, which was a big hit. I'm trying to think of an after while crocodile pun with the body part, but I'm drawing a blank. Any YouTube comments want to take a shot at it? Not my child, my brother. He was 11 and suddenly tired and lethargic. He missed a lot of school. He hated missing school. My mom kept taking him in, and they'd say it's the flu or puberty or mono, and it wouldn't ever get better. After a few weeks of this, my mom brought him to the hospital again and yelled at his doctors that something was seriously wrong with their son, and they needed to do their jobs and figure out what it was. It was leukemia. They called the next morning just before 2 a.m. and said the test came back, your son needs to come in now. Not in the morning, right now. I can't imagine what happens to a parent in that moment when you know it's bad because they call you in at 2 a.m., but you don't know why. He was in treatment for just over a year and was re-diagnosed on his birthday. A few months later, he had a bone marrow transplant and was able to come home pretty quickly. There were complications from the transplant called graft versus host disease, like organ rejection, but the new cells try to reject you. It attacked his musculoskeletal system, causing stiffness in some dangerous situations. This October will be 8 years since the transplant, and he's cancer-free. That boy loves to use the cancer card now, but he's definitely earned the right. A doctor didn't believe me when I had a kidney stone that was too big to pass. He only changed his mind when another doctor checked me and started freaking out since I was getting super sick from the stuck stone. The doctor ended up getting fired from the hospital and my parents sued him. I wouldn't call it urgent medical care, but I was stuck in my room for about 5 hours on my bed with my head pressed into my shoulder because I had pinched a nerve. I had never had one before. I wasn't able to move my head at all, and when my mom got home from work, she called an ambulance for me. They carried me out in a sitting position and off to the hospital we went. When we got there, it took about a half hour for me to get into the hospital bed and ended up just giving up and leaving me sitting upright. The doctor pulled my mom out of the room and asked if I had a history of faking injuries in order to get painkillers, because I was pressing against the pain instead of leaning my head away from it. I had bronchitis, which turned into pneumonia, and when I went to the nurse, she sent me back to class because my fever was only 99. By the end of school, I made it home on the bus, but I had to go to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe. My lungs were filled with fluid. I was in 4th grade. I was out of school for 2 weeks, I think. When I was 16, I was in a really dark place, and one day I decided to confide to my doctor that I thought I might be depressed and see what he would recommend. Dude straight up laughed in my face and said, "You're not depressed, you're just a teenager." I told my mom I wanted to change doctors after that, and it took another year and tons of self-destructive behavior before I sought help again. Urgent a condition as the others, but it still manages to raise my blood pressure years later. Starting from when I was about 7, I would have terrible stomach pains, which my pediatrician claimed was attention-seeking behavior. He told my parents that they should punish me anytime I complained of stomach problems. My parents, who love yelling, jumped at a new reason to scream at me on a nearly daily basis. When I went to college, I was finally diagnosed as having a hiatal hernia, just like my grandparents, father, and aunt. When I was a kid, they even commented that I had the same symptoms they did, which for my pediatrician meant that I was just mimicking their complaints and didn't have the same condition. Because it had been untreated for so long, I now have to worry about Barrett's and esophageal cancer. Lucky me. New hearing doctor didn't believe that I needed hypoallergenic molds made and ended up making regular ones to try them out. Within a few days, my left ear was sore. It hurt a lot more than usual. Doctor and ear specialist thought it was just a little bit of irritation and that it would clear up quickly. It ended up being a major middle inner ear infection. Ruptured the eardrum, pus and blood everywhere on my pillow. About a month of agony, a lot of drugs, and a lot of specialists in the hospital. I was already very hard of hearing. That made me lose another 10 decibels permanently. This isn't so much a faking it situation, but more of my ex-girlfriend having to deal with a really incompetent security guard that hindered her getting medical help. My ex had a severe peanut allergy, and one time she ate a Thai chicken pizza in the college cafeteria that did not list peanuts as one of the ingredients. After her throat started burning, she knew something was wrong, so she grabbed a glass of milk, which I guess helped a bit, and went outside for some air because she was having trouble breathing. A security guard was passing outside in front of the building and saw that she might need some help. At this point, my ex was panicking and frantically looking through her bag for her EpiPen. The security guard asked what was wrong, and she tried to explain that she had a severe peanut allergy and needed to be taken to the hospital. When the security guard saw her take out the EpiPen, she took it from her and said that it was school policy that she be the one to do it. She then asked her to hold out her arm so she could inject her. My girlfriend could not believe that the security guard was trying to inject her arm like it was a flu shot, and out of frustration, she yanked it from the guard's hand and put it in her thigh, like you were supposed to, and sternly told her, "I need to get to a hospital now." When I was 9, I would get stomach aches when I went to school. My doctor insisted I was faking, but my mom insisted he take it seriously. Finally, they gave me a barium x-ray and saw I had a stomach ulcer. I had to take Malox and drink milk at every meal and snack. I even had to get special permission to get milk from the cafeteria at morning recess. My teacher ridiculed me for that. She was horrible and abusive. While I never received any of her physical abuse, there were 2 other boys in my class who got it on a regular basis. This would have been 1980, so it wasn't normal for teachers to be pulling hair or knocking a kid's face into a desk. Every day, the 3 of us would have to stay after school while she told us all how stupid we were. My stomach aches did not get better, and the doctor accused me of some combination of faking/exaggerating/non-compliance. We literally had to save all the empty Malox bottles to prove I was really taking my daily doses. Today we know that having me drink milk 6-7 times a day was exacerbating things, and in retrospect, my mom never really understood how stressful it was being in that class. It wasn't until the last few months of 4th grade when they finally transferred me to another classroom that I got well again. Later, my mom told me that even she thought I'd been exaggerating when I talked about how mean the teacher was. Because I left the honors class and moved down a level, my former teacher still ridiculed me pretty frequently when we crossed paths, but it didn't tie my stomach up in knots. I'm just going to read this comment here because I agree with it completely. What a vile excuse for a human being. I can't believe individuals like this get to have any authority over young children. So sorry that happened to you. Not me, but my mother. She had been very sick and tired. Imagine a cold, but it's 100 times worse. The doctor she saw multiple times kept basically blowing it off, saying she just needed some rest. It kept getting worse. One day, I was home with her. She was in bed sleeping and I was out in the living room watching TV. For some reason, she decided to walk out into the living room and sit in the chair across from the couch. She looked like a legit zombie, and when she sat down, she could barely hold her head up. I immediately called 911. Turned out she had pneumonia, and one of her lungs was entirely full of fluid, while the other was more than halfway. She spent a few days in the hospital and fully recovered. I don't know what made her decide to walk into the living room, but if she hadn't, then she would likely have died that day. All of that could have been avoided if the doctor she saw would have just paid closer attention to what was going on. I can barely remember this, but I was around the age of 11. I went for a sore throat, severe cough that would make me dry heave, phlegm, just the whole thing. Doctor says it's all in my head, despite me having an obviously inflamed throat and a very wet cough. I remember sitting there with my grandma who was like, I don't think it was in her head. I went back the same week and was diagnosed with walking pneumonia. I think that's when we switched doctors too. Not a doctor or nurse, but a bunch of camp counselors and the infirmary doc. I went to a sleepaway camp for children with cancer or anything chronic and or life-threatening. It's the second day and I wake up feeling a little bit sick with a sore throat. Okay, I'll just drink some water and I'll be okay. It's the summer after all. I can't get sick. Breakfast rolls around at 10 a.m. and I'm not hungry and my throat is getting worse. I tell one of my counselors that I'm not feeling good and he says, eat something, wait till after the morning activity. I couldn't bring myself to swallow, so I just sat there and then went to arts and crafts. I feel so sick at this point, I just sit in the corner of the arts and crafts room, literally fading in and out. I tell a different counselor and he says, drink some water. I do, it doesn't help at all. I realize that they're not going to do anything unless I make a big deal about it. I think to stand up and make an announcement. When I stand up, I immediately need to sit down again, and now my throat hurts too much to talk. I say, I don't feel good in my raspy, weak voice. He says, wait until after this activity. Lunch comes around at 12:30 and I go to the bathroom before sitting down and I look like a zombie in the bathroom mirror. I go back to my table and I say I can't eat. The counselors ask me why. I say, I feel sick. One of the counselors begrudgingly agrees to take me to the infirmary, which was a mini hospital because all the kids here have medical issues. I can barely walk, but I make it there, and promptly get sat down on an old wood bench and left alone as my counselor walks back to eat lunch. After about 15 minutes of waiting, a doctor pokes her head out of her office and asks me what's wrong. I tell her, I felt sick since I woke up, my throat hurts. She feels my forehead and says, you don't feel warm, but I'll get a thermometer. She comes back with a thermometer and puts it under my tongue. I had a fever of 102 and strep throat at a tightly packed dining hall surrounded by kids with compromised immune systems. I'm surprised I didn't get anyone sick, but the fact that it took 5 hours to get a chronically sick kid some freaking medical attention still makes my blood boil. I was bedridden for 3 days and missed literally everything I wanted to do while there. The worst part was, this was my last year before I got too old. I was losing my hair, my gums bled randomly, my skin looked like garbage, my muscles cramped up randomly, I literally fell over once while standing on my feet, I got horribly depressed, world felt like cardboard is the only way I can think to describe it, and all I wanted to do was eat and sleep. Sometimes I would start talking in conversation and get a word jumble midway through where words didn't come out right, which was the beginning of some social anxiety for me. I went to several doctors who plainly thought I was full of it. Several of them asked me how much I drank, and one of them asked me over and over again as if he didn't believe me when I said I didn't. I was tested for low thyroid, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other scary things, but nothing came up. This was over a 6-month period. I finally figured it out by Googling my symptoms, which led me to a message board that suggested I find a doctor who would give me a blood test for it so I would know for sure. Turns out I was really low on B12, somewhere in the low 300s I think. They went from nearly eye-rolling me to my face to giving me a B12 shot in the office before I left on my second visit and prescribing sublingual B12 to me. I actually found out a few years later that I have a gene mutation that keeps me from methylating B vitamins. I mention it to every new doctor I see now, and they always look at me like I'm a hypochondriac, then look it up on their laptop and kind of go, okay, like they're relieved I'm not full of crap. Not exactly accused of faking it, more so just disbelieved or taken lightly. I went into emergency at the hospital because it was Saturday for a medium-level abdominal pain that had been ongoing since the previous weekend. I'd been to the general practitioner on Wednesday or Thursday and had a blood test booked for the coming Tuesday, early as possible. However, my mom decided to take me in because of how long it lasted without change. At the hospital, I had a blood test taken and the doctor thought 50 milligrams of codeine would take care of my non-problem. It did nothing, so he gave another one and Panadol. He ended up believing it would work, but it sent everyone frantic when I ended up bent over, frothing at the mouth and coughing up blood. The blood test said pancreatitis. My brother had severe asthma, as in I'd wake up in the middle of the night to paramedics and an ambulance and only ask which grandparents I was going to wake up at. He had an asthma attack in school and his second grade teacher declared that he was faking it. Another teacher, Mrs. B, who was also friends with my mom, told her that he had a very well-documented history, several medical journal articles written about him by this point with more to follow as he got older. He was definitely having an asthma attack and needed his inhaler and possibly several breathing treatments now. We kept several different inhalers at the school, but they had to be given by the nurse. The second grade teacher once again declared she knew what an asthma attack looked like and he was faking it. Mrs. B, the friend teacher, took him out of class immediately, tried the inhalers, and called our mom. He ended up staying in the hospital for several weeks and wasn't well enough to go to school for months. The school district not only had to pay for tutors to come to our house to help him keep up with classes, but also had to pay for his medical costs since mom was also a teacher. The second grade teacher tried to get Mrs. B in trouble for removing a student from her classroom without permission and almost got fired herself for causing the situation to get as bad as it did. Mom also was granted a transfer to our elementary school, which she had been trying to get for a while to help make sure my brother's health was okay, and she helped create an amazing, successful reading program there. The school district also implemented some changes that allowed kids with rescue inhalers to be able to keep them with them instead of with the nurse, as long as certain procedures were followed. The second grade teacher, on my brother's first day back to school, declared in a loud voice, "The next time, let me know if you need your inhalers." The overprotective big sister in me took over and loudly shouted back, "He did!" The school secretary gleefully told my mom it was the first time she had ever heard me talk above a whisper.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.